All right, good morning, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you. There are few housekeeping rules which I would request you to keep in mind. First would be request you to kindly close all applications for a seamless experience with us. Please use the chat feature of the Zoom to share your questions, queries throughout the session. All participants except for the panelist will be placed in listen-only mode. When sharing a question, please mention your name and your organization name with us. You may use the chat feature to share your point of view as well. Please use a steady internet connection, broadband, 4G, dongle, etc. for a seamless experience. You may use wired or wireless headphones, speakers for an enhanced audio experience. In case you face issues with connectivity, you may use the Zoom app on your smartphone to join the session. All right, good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very, very warm welcome to the inaugural edition of the Education Summit 2021, hosted by the Indian Express Online Media and Google Education. India Education Summit aims to bring together stakeholders from the education sector under one roof to discuss and deliberate on the evolution of the system in India. Before we start, I would especially like to thank our partners, Google for Education, and our co-presenter, Adobe. Spread over 3 days, starting from today, we will take a deep dive into the Indian education system and unearth fascinating and interesting insights about the ecosystem with each session. We ask that you remain connected with us throughout the course of the day via social media led by the hashtag IES2021. The theme for the day is Educating Bharat. I request Cabinet Minister for Education, Government of India, Mahoday Ramesh Pokhriyal ji to deliver his inaugural speech.
पहले तो जो आपने शिक्षा संवाद किया है, मैं आपको धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ। आपके संस्थान को इस बात की बधाई देना चाहता हूँ कि जो नई शिक्षा नीति 2020 आई है हिंदुस्तान में, वो भारत की NEP 2020 पूरी दुनिया के लिए एक उत्सुकता का विषय बना है और पूरी दुनिया इस बात को जानती है, मानती भी है कि ये दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा रिफॉर्म के रूप में ये नई शिक्षा नीति आई है। बहुत बड़े बदलाव, बड़े सुधारों के साथ आई है और वो हमने लागू भी कर दी है। शायद ये भी पूरी दुनिया का किसी भी नीति पर सर्वाधिक परामर्श वाली ये नीति होगी, जिसमें ये नवाचार की दिशा में देखेंगे तो दुनिया का एक रिकॉर्ड होगा, जो ग्राम प्रधान से लेकर आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी तक और गांव से लेकर संसद तक, छात्र से लेकर अभिभावक तक और शिक्षक से लेकर के शिक्षाविदों तक, विशेषज्ञों से लेकर के और वैज्ञानिकों तक, जनप्रतिनिधियों से लेकर के और तमाम NGOs तक, कोई भी क्षेत्र हमने ऐसा नहीं छोड़ा है जहां विमर्श नहीं हुआ। और आप जानते हैं कि इस देश में शिक्षा का, ये दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा लोकतांत्रिक देश है और इस देश में यदि देखेंगे 1000 से भी अधिक विश्वविद्यालय हैं, 50,000 के आसपास डिग्री कॉलेज हैं, 1 करोड़ 10 लाख से अधिक यहाँ अध्यापक हैं। यहाँ पर यदि स्कूलों की संख्या देखें तो 15 लाख से भी अधिक स्कूल है और कुल मिलाकर के यदि आबादी छात्रों की संख्या को देखें तो अमेरिका की आबादी से भी अधिक 33 करोड़ से भी अधिक छात्र छात्राएं हैं। तमाम देशों की कई देशों की मिलकर के इतनी जनसंख्या नहीं होगी जितने हिंदुस्तान में हमारे छात्र छात्र हैं। और फिर यंग इंडिया रहने वाला है, दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा लोकतांत्रिक देश और आगे आने वाले 25-30 वर्षों तक यंग इंडिया रहने वाला है। तो उस यंग इंडिया को एक नई शिक्षा नीति की जरूरत थी और ऐसे वक्त पर शिक्षा नीति की जरूरत थी जब इस देश को ऐसी लीडरशिप मिली है जिसके पास विजन भी है और उस विजन को क्रियान्वित करने का मिशन भी है, मादा भी है। और इसलिए आदरणीय नरेंद्र मोदी जो देश के यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री जी हैं, उनके मन में शुरू से था कि अब तो देश स्वाधीन हो गया, तो अब तो अपनी ऐसी नीति आनी चाहिए जो जमीन पर खड़े होकर के विश्व के शिखर तक हमारी पीढ़ी को लेकर के जा सके, ज्ञान, विज्ञान, अनुसंधान, नवाचार के क्षेत्र में। और इसीलिए व्यापक परिवर्तन के साथ स्कूली शिक्षा से देखेंगे तो मातृभाषा में हमने इसको शुरू किया। मातृभाषा में प्रारंभिक शिक्षा अपनी मातृभाषा में होगा और मातृभाषा में फिर 5+3+3+4 क्या और 10+2 की को खत्म कर दिया और थकी और पिटी व्यवस्था थी। अब तो नए युग में नए विचारों के साथ, नए उल्लास, नए उमंग और नए पाठ्यक्रम, नए कंटेंट के साथ एक नए भारत के निर्माण की बात है और इसलिए मातृभाषा में वो शुरू होता है और फिर कक्षा 6 से वोकेशनल एजुकेशन वो भी इंटर्नशिप के साथ शुरू होती है। वोकेशनल एजुकेशन ताकि वो उसको पता चले वो आगे किधर जाना चाहता है, उसका कौशल का विकास कैसे होना है, किस क्षेत्र में वो आगे बढ़ना चाहता है और वो भी इंटर्नशिप के साथ कि नहीं केवल अंक ज्ञान और अक्षर ज्ञान का न करे, केवल पढ़े नहीं बल्कि वो जाए, खेतों में जाए, क्षेत्रों में जाए, उद्योगों में जाए, उन कलाओं के साथ जुड़े, उन विधाओं के साथ जुड़े। जो देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी जो आत्मनिर्भर भारत की बात करते हैं, उस आत्मनिर्भरता उसमें कक्षा 6 से आने शुरू हो जाए और स्कूली शिक्षा से बाहर निकलते निकलते हुए योद्धा के रूप में खड़ा हो जाए, जो कुछ भी करने को तैयार हो सके, उसके हाथों में वो कौशल हो, ये शिक्षा। और अब मूल्यांकन करने का भी पूरी तरीके से तरीका बदल दिया। मूल्यांकन अब वो 360 डिग्री होलिस्टिक मूल्यांकन होगा उसका। वो अपना स्वयं का मूल्यांकन करेगा, उसका अभिभावक भी मूल्यांकन करेगा, अध्यापक जी भी मूल्यांकन करेंगे और उसका साथी भी मूल्यांकन करेगा। अब आप समझ सकते हैं कि उस छात्र को स्वयं अपने बारे में विचार करना है कि वो अपने को क्या नंबर देना चाहता है, क्या मूल्यांकन करता है, कितना सोचेगा अपने बारे में। आप समझ सकते हैं क्योंकि कोई भी इंसान अपने बारे में, अपनी कमियों के बारे में अपने आप जानता है और जिस दिन उसके मन में ये आ जाता है कि ये कमी है मेरी, इसको मुझे दूर करना है, उस दिन वो सफलता के शिखर को चूमता है और इसलिए वो अपना भी मूल्यांकन करेगा। उसको मालूम है कि उसका साथी भी उसका मूल्यांकन करेगा तो उससे संबंध भी ठीक रखेगा और वो साथी उसकी अभिव्यक्ति ये से भी परिचित कराता रहेगा ताकि उसको ये महसूस हो, उसको भरोसा हो कि हाँ ये इसमें जो भी विषय है ये इसको तो सब आता है, व्यवहार भी अच्छा है, विजन भी अच्छा है, सब कुछ ये अच्छा है। तो वो उसको मालूम है कि अपने साथी से भी मिलकर के रहना है और अपनी अभिव्यक्ति को भी उसको प्रदर्शित करते रहना है। अभिभावक को भी पता है कि मैंने अपने बच्चे को यदि नंबर देनी है तो वो भी ईमानदारी से देगा, वो भी कोशिश करेगा और वो उसकी छोटी बड़ी चीजों को देखता रहेगा। केवल वो अक्षर ज्ञान और अंक ज्ञान का नहीं, उसका व्यवहार कैसा है, उसका व्यक्तित्व, उसकी सोच क्या है, उसका काम करने का तरीका क्या है, किस तरीके से उसके अंदर की भावनाओं को अभिव्यक्त करने का ढंग है। ये 360 डिग्री होलिस्टिक जिस दिन मूल्यांकन शुरू हो जाएगा उस दिन आप समझ सकते हैं कि उस बच्चे में कितनी अभिव्यक्ति बाहर आएगी। और इसलिए हम स्कूली शिक्षा से ही आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस ला रहे, शायद दुनिया का ये पहला देश होगा जो स्कूली शिक्षा में आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस को पढ़ाएगा। अभी तो हम उच्च शिक्षा में जब जाते हैं तब IIT में जाकर के जो है आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस पढ़ने की शुरुआत होती है। ये देश शुरू से ही स्कूली शिक्षा से बिल्कुल वो होना चाहता है। कुछ लोगों के मन में जरूर आया कि डॉक्टर निशंक आप मेरे से सवाल किए गए कि आप एक और कहते हैं कि ग्लोबल अंतरराष्ट्रीय स्तर पर की शिक्षा देना चाहते हैं और दूसरी ओर आप मातृभाषा में शिक्षा देने की बात करते हैं। उनका सीधा सीधा प्रत्यक्ष अप्रत्यक्ष कहीं ना कहीं बात होती है कि फिर अंग्रेजी के माध्यम से क्यों नहीं, यदि विश्व के भला पर जाना है। तो मुझे लगता है आप नहीं कहते क्योंकि उनको मालूम है कि ये जो बाधा है वो भाषा किसी की प्रगति में कभी इस तरीके की बाधा नहीं बनी और जबरदस्ती की थोपी भाषा और जबरदस्ती की गड़ी भाषा किसी के व्यक्तित्व को निखार नहीं सकती है। इसलिए जब अपनी मातृभाषा में अभिव्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता है और तमाम देशों ने देखा ना, जापान ने अपनी मातृभाषा में शिक्षा दी, आप प्रगति में है। जापान हो चाहे वो फ्रांस हो, जर्मनी हो, यहाँ तक कि हमारे बाद आजाद होने वाला इजराइल जिसको सब खत्म हो गया था, उसने भी D1 से अपनी मातृभाषा में अपनी भाषा में शिक्षा दी। तो वो किसी देश से पीछे नहीं है। तो फिर हम इन तर्कों को क्यों दें? और फिर हमारे पास तो तमिल, तेलुगु, मलयालम, कन्नड़, गुजराती, मराठी, बंगाली, उड़िया, असमिया, उर्दू, संस्कृत, हिंदी, पंजाबी, कितने खूबसूरत 22 भारतीय भाषाएं हैं और इनमें अपना ज्ञान भी है, विज्ञान भी है, इनमें अपने नवाचार भी है, परंपराएं भी हैं। उन भाषाओं की सशक्तिकरण की दिशा में हमको विचार करना है। बाकी किसी पर भाषा थोपी नहीं जाएगी, खुला मैदान है, किसी भी भाषा को ले सकते हैं और ज्यादा से ज्यादा भाषाओं के ज्ञान करके आगे हम बढ़ सकते हैं। और हमने देखा होगा कि उच्च शिक्षा में भी हमने विषयों को भी पूरी तरीके से, जो आप कह रहे हैं कि कैसे बदलाव आएगा, ये बदलाव आएगा, पूरा मैदान खाली छोड़ दिया दौड़ने के लिए। किसी भी भाषा को ले सकते हो तुम, चाहे तो किसी भी विषय को ले सकते हो, किसी भी विषय के साथ किसी विषय को ले सकते हो। आप विज्ञान के साथ साहित्य ले सकते हो, आप इंजीनियरिंग के साथ संगीत ले सकते हो। आप जिस क्षेत्र में बढ़ना चाहते हैं, जहाँ आपको लगता है कि आप छलांग मार सकते हैं, वो पूरा मैदान खाली है। और इतना ही नहीं, तो आप जब चाहे आ सकते हैं और जब चाहे छोड़ सकते हैं। यदि आप 1 वर्ष में परिस्थितियां हैं आपकी, आप छोड़ना चाहते हैं, आप छोड़ दीजिए, हताश निराश नहीं होंगे आप 1 वर्ष में भी आपको हम सर्टिफिकेट दे देंगे। यदि 2 वर्ष में ऐसी परिस्थिति बन रही है कि 2 वर्ष में छोड़ने की स्थिति है, तो भी निराश होने की जरूरत नहीं है। 2 वर्ष में आपको डिप्लोमा मिल जाएगा और 3 वर्ष में डिग्री मिल जाएगी। लेकिन यदि आप ऐसा लगता है कि नहीं, आपको 2 वर्ष में परिस्थिति ऐसी थी कि मैं आगे पढ़ नहीं पा रहा था, मेरी पारिवारिक परिस्थितियां थी, या मैं बीमार हो गया था, या ऐसी कठिन समस्याएं आ गई थी, और अब मैं ठीक हो गया हूँ, मैं आगे बढ़ना चाहता हूँ, तो जहां से आपने छोड़ा है आप वहीं से उसको शुरू कर सकते हैं। हम एकेडमिक क्रेडिट बैंक बना रहे हैं, वो बैंक की चाबी भी आपके पास दे देंगे। जब चाहे आप उस बैंक की चाबी जहां से चाहे वहां से उठा करके आगे उस कोर्स को कर सकते हैं, बढ़ सकते हैं। आपको चिंता करने की कोई जरूरत नहीं, ये है। और इतना ही नहीं, तो हमने शोध और अनुसंधान के क्षेत्र में भी पूरी ताकत के साथ पूरा खुला मैदान दे दिया है। एक वक्त था जब विदेशों में जाने की होड़ थी लोगों को, अब छात्रों के मन में शोध अनुसंधान के लिए अब देश में इतना बड़ा हमारे वित्त मंत्री जी ने तो अपने बजट में नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन के लिए 50,000 करोड़ का प्रावधान रख दिया। हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा कि यदि लाल बहादुर शास्त्री जी ने उस समय जय जवान जय किसान का नारा लगाया था, क्योंकि परिस्थितियां थी अन्न के से भी हम लोग आंतरिक संकट और बाहरी संकट से जूझ रहे थे। देश खड़ा हो गया था जय जवान जय किसान के नारे पर, और फिर अटल जी ने जय विज्ञान के नारे पर देश को मां शक्ति के रूप में आगे बढ़ाने की दिशा में बहुत सशक्त कदम रखे, जिसमें परमाणु परीक्षण का उदाहरण पूरी दुनिया के सामने। और हमारे देश के वर्तमान प्रधानमंत्री जी नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने कहा, मैंने दुनिया में शीर्ष पर देश को लेकर के जाना है, देशवासियों को बढ़ना है। तो अब अनुसंधान की जरूरत है, शोध और अनुसंधान की जरूरत है। जो हमारे पास है उसको नित नए नवाचार के साथ उसको पूरी दुनिया में उस प्रतिस्पर्धा में आगे बढ़ने की जरूरत है। और इसीलिए जहां नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन का गठन किया जा रहा है इस नई शिक्षा नीति के तहत, वहीं एजुकेशन टेक्नोलॉजी फोरम का भी गठन किया जाएगा, NETF, नेशनल एजुकेशन टेक्नोलॉजी फोरम। ये अंतिम छोर तक के व्यक्ति को तकनीकी का ज्ञान हो, और अंतिम छोर से जो वोकल फॉर लोकल है और लोकल फॉर ग्लोबल, लोकल से वो ग्लोबल तक जा सके, ये है इस नई शिक्षा नीति का मसौदा। और आपको मालूम है कि इस नई शिक्षा नीति को लेकर के पूरी दुनिया में बहुत उत्सुकता है, और बहुत सारे देशों ने संपर्क किया है। अभी मैं चर्चा कर रहा था कि चाहे वो कैम्ब्रिज विश्वविद्यालय है जिसने इस की बहुत ही प्रशंसा की है। अभी ब्रिटेन के विदेश मंत्री जी से उनके भारत यात्रा के दौरान मुझे उनसे बातचीत करने का जब मौका मिला तो बहुत खुश थे, और उन्होंने कहा कि ऐसे ऐतिहासिक और बहुत बड़े रिफॉर्म के साथ ये जो शिक्षा नीति आई है देश के लिए, दुनिया के लिए ऐतिहासिक है। और मुझे भरोसा है कि हम GR को भी बढ़ाएंगे और अंतिम छोर की सबके लिए शिक्षा अंतिम छोर के बच्चे को भी स्पर्श करेंगे और शिखर पर भी हम पहुंचेंगे। इसलिए जो आपने कहा कि ये शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में क्या लाभ होने की उम्मीद है, ये दुनिया में ज्ञान की महाशक्ति के रूप में स्थापित होने वाला ये रास्ता है। कोरोना के इस महाकाल में अचानक पूरी दुनिया ठहर से गई, लोग घरों में कैद हो गए और जैसे मैंने अभी बताया कि हिंदुस्तान इतना बड़ा देश है जिसमें 1000 से अधिक विश्वविद्यालय, 45,000 से अधिक डिग्री कॉलेज, 1 करोड़ 10 लाख से अधिक अध्यापक, 15-16 लाख से अधिक स्कूल और अमेरिका की आबादी से अधिक 33 करोड़ छात्र छात्र, इतना बड़ा तंत्र है शिक्षा का। अचानक बच्चे घरों पर कैद हो जाएं, आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि कितनी बड़ी चुनौती रही होगी, जबकि दुनिया के तमाम देशों ने अपने को पहले ही कह दिया है 1 साल 2 साल पीछे कर दिया, लेकिन हिंदुस्तान ही है। हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी ने जब इस बात का उद्घोष किया कि जितनी बड़ी कठिनाई होगी, जितनी बड़ी परेशानी होगी, जितनी बड़ी चुनौती होगी, यदि उसका डटकर मुकाबला करेंगे तो ये अवसरों में तब्दील हो सकती है। और उन्होंने आह्वान किया था कि मैं आह्वान करता हूं कि इस चुनौती का डटकर मुकाबला हो, और शिक्षा विभाग ने हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी की प्रेरणा से बिल्कुल डट कर के मुकाबला किया और हमने 1 वर्ष खराब नहीं होने दिया बच्चों का। समय पर परीक्षा करवाई, चाहे सीबीएसई की परीक्षाएं रही हों, चाहे जेईई की हों, चाहे नीट की रही हों, चाहे विश्वविद्यालयों का फाइनल परीक्षाएं रही, समय पर परीक्षा करवाई, समय पर रिजल्ट घोषित किया। और नीट और जेईई तो आपको तो मालूम है कि दुनिया कोरोना काल की सबसे बड़ी परीक्षाएं ये साबित हुई है। अब हम लोग 33 करोड़ छात्र छात्राओं को ऑनलाइन पर लाने की जो चुनौती थी, बच्चा पढ़ाई भी करे और साथ में भी न जाए, यदि वो पढ़ाई नहीं करता, उसको ऑनलाइन पर नहीं लाते हम, तो आप समझ सकते हैं कि कितने अवसाद में जाते बच्चे, अभिभावकों की क्या स्थिति होती। लेकिन मुझे इस बात को लेकर के गर्व महसूस होता है कि मेरे देश के अध्यापक गण ने और अभिभावक ने, दोनों ने मिल करके, जहाँ शिक्षा विभाग रात दिन खप करके हम कंटेंट भी तैयार करते रहे, समय समय पर लगातार निर्णय पर निर्णय, कब कौन परिस्थितिजन्य निर्णय लेना है वो लगातार वो निर्णय भी लेते रहे। और इसलिए आज पूरी दुनिया ने इस बात को बहुत खुशी से स्वीकारा है कि हाँ, हिंदुस्तान जैसा देश भी गजब का देश है, जहाँ इन विषम परिस्थितियों में छात्रों के साथ ऑनलाइन करोड़ों 30-33 करोड़ छात्रों के साथ न केवल संवाद होता है, न केवल पाठ्यक्रम उनको सुनिश्चित होता है, बल्कि परीक्षाएं भी होती हैं और समय पर सब निर्णय होते हैं। अब जो आपने कहा है कि डिजिटल शिक्षा का है, क्योंकि परिस्थितियां हैं, अब हमने मजबूरी में ही सही, लेकिन शायद 20 साल बाद जो काम होता वो हम लोगों ने ऐसी परिस्थितियों में खड़ा किया। इसलिए कक्षाओं का तो कोई विकल्प नहीं हो सकता, लेकिन कक्षाएं भी हों और डिजिटल भी हो, कब कौन सी परिस्थितियां कब कैसे आए, इसलिए वन नेशन वन डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म किया हमने स्वयं प्रभा, ई पाठशाला, दीक्षा, इन सब के माध्यम से हम लोगों ने छात्रों को जोड़ करके रखा है, उनको पाठ्यक्रम देना। और जिनके पास अभी तक किसी प्रकार की कोई सुविधा नहीं थी, चाहे स्मार्ट टेलीफोन नहीं था या उसको नेट की कोई सुविधा नहीं थी, तो उन छात्रों के साथ स्वयं प्रभा टीवी चैनल के माध्यम से वन क्लास वन चैनल, ये 32 चैनल स्वयं प्रभा के शुरू करके उस तक भी पहुंचने की कोशिश की है, और सामुदायिक रेडियो के माध्यम से पहुंचने की कोशिश की, रात में खप करके कोशिश की। हाँ, अभी डिजिटल शिक्षा को अंतिम छोर तक के बच्चे तक पहुंचने में अभी 10-20% ऐसा है जहां हमको और तेजी से पहुंच करनी है। लेकिन जिस तेजी से इस गड्ढे को पाटा और जिस तेजी से ऑनलाइन शिक्षा को हम लोगों ने जोड़ा, ये निश्चित दुनिया के लिए एक अजूबा तो था ही, और लेकिन मुझे खुशी है। और भारत का शिक्षा इस कोरोना काल में शिक्षा व्यवस्था पर, शिक्षा की दिशा पर यदि कोई काम करे तो उसको जरूर लगेगा कि जब संकल्प शक्ति होती है, इच्छा शक्ति होती है और दृढ़ता होती है, तो बहुत सारे मार्ग निकल आते हैं। वो शिक्षा विभाग ने इसको साबित किया है। हम डिजिटल शिक्षा की दिशा में लगातार कोशिश करें, हम कंटेंट भी तैयार कर रहे हैं। उत्कृष्ट कोटि का जब कंटेंट होगा, पाठ्यक्रम होगा, तो हमारी पीढ़ी और तेजी से बढ़ करके आगे आएगी। तो क्लास के साथ अध्यापक के माध्यम से किस तरीके से इसको भी हम आगे बढ़ा सकते हैं। हम इस पर भी लगातार विचार विमर्श करें, कोशिश करें और मार्ग में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। 33 करोड़ छात्र छात्राएं हैं और उनके यदि माता पिता को जोड़े तो 99 करोड़ होते हैं। इनसे लगातार संवाद होना, उसी से निकला था हमारा मनोदर्पण, जहां हमने मानसिक दबाव को कम करने के लिए किसी प्रकार के अवसाद में ना जाए बच्चा, ऐसा पोर्टल तैयार किया। उस पोर्टल से सारी जानकारी ली और 500 ऐसे मनोवैज्ञानिक विशेषज्ञ हमारे थे जो 24 घंटे फ्री ऐसा एक लाइन दी उनको, एक ऐसा नंबर दिया जो कभी भी कोई भी कहीं से भी उस डॉक्टर से परामर्श कर सकते हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि ये दुनिया का ये भी अपने में एक अलग अनोखा उदाहरण होगा। दूसरा, हम लोगों ने प्रज्ञाता जो समय समय पर निर्देशन किया, लगातार वो करते रहे, वो भी आप समझ सकते हैं कि दिनों के हिसाब से, सप्ताहों के नहीं, घंटों के हिसाब से भी कई बार हमको नीतियों में परिवर्तन करना पड़ा। समय और परिस्थितियों के अनुसार हम दौड़ते भागते रहे, लेकिन मुझे खुशी है इस दौड़ते भागते में छात्र, शिक्षक, अभिभावक और शिक्षा मंत्रालय, और यहाँ तक केवल भारत सरकार का शिक्षा मंत्रालय नहीं, राज्यों के भी शिक्षा मंत्रालय जिस गतिशीलता से समन्वय के साथ आगे बढ़ते रहे, ये दुनिया के लिए एक अद्भुत उदाहरण था। आपने जिस बात को कहा है कि क्या ये डिजिटल और जो अब मिक्स होगी शिक्षा, आपको तो मालूम है कि हमने NIRF में टॉप 100 यूनिवर्सिटीज को ऑनलाइन पाठ्यक्रम देने के लिए इजाजत देने का निर्णय लिया है। और वो ऑनलाइन, पहले भी दूरस्थ शिक्षा होती थी हमारे यहाँ, और अब तो ये तकनीकी का जमाना है। हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री ने मेक इन इंडिया, डिजिटल इंडिया, स्किल इंडिया, स्टार्टअप, स्टैंड अप की बात की है। बात ही नहीं किया, उसको आधारशिला खड़ी की। आधारशिला की मेरे आत्मनिर्भर भारत की दिशा में नहीं, अब हम कौशल का विकास करेंगे अपना, और फिर मेक इन इंडिया। अब मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि मेरे IITs, मेरे NITs, मेरे केंद्रीय विश्वविद्यालय, आईसर, IIM सहित जो देश के बहुत महत्वपूर्ण संस्थान है राष्ट्रीय महत्व के, उन्होंने इस बात को अभी रात दिन खप करके साबित भी किया है। और इसलिए जो दुनिया के तमाम शीर्ष विश्वविद्यालयों को भी हम यहाँ करना चाहते हैं। जो छात्र दुनिया में जा रहे हैं उसके लिए भी आह्वान करना चाहते हैं, स्टे इन इंडिया। और जो दुनिया के छात्र इधर पढ़ना चाहते हैं स्टडी इन इंडिया के तहत, वो भी आ सकते हैं। लेकिन हम लगातार दुनिया के साथ अपना क्रेडिट संवाद जारी रखना चाहते हैं। और ये पूरी दुनिया का बच्चा कभी भी आ सकता है, हमारा बच्चा किसी से भी कोई जानकारी प्राप्त कर सकता है, शिक्षा ले सकता है। और इसलिए ये जो नीचे तक हम लोग और पुख्ता कर रहे हैं, ताकि यदि ऐसी परिस्थिति भी आ जाए तो हिंदुस्तान हमेशा ऑनलाइन के लिए भी तैयार रहे और ऑफलाइन के लिए भी तैयार रहे। दोनों तैयारी हमारे समान रूप से चल रही है। मुझे लगता है कि कुछ बिंदु, जैसे मैंने पहले भी कहा कि हम वोकेशनल एजुकेशन, स्कूली शिक्षा से 6वीं से शुरू कर रहे हैं, और वो भी इंटर्नशिप के साथ कर रहे हैं। अब वहां से शुरू करेंगे, उसको जोड़ेंगे। मेरे देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी ने जिस तरीके से कहा कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत की जरूरत है, कौन बनाएगा आत्मनिर्भर भारत? ये देश 130 करोड़ लोगों का, 135 करोड़ लोगों का देश है। और मुझे लगता है कि हिंदुस्तान तो अपने आप में पूरा एक दुनिया है। वहां से जब स्थानीय समस्याओं के साथ जुड़ेगा, स्थानीय उत्पादों के साथ जुड़ेगा, जब वहां की जानकारियों के साथ, परंपराओं के साथ जुड़ेगा, और तो वहीं पर जिस तरीके से शोध, अनुसंधान और नवाचार के साथ उन चीजों को उठा करके लाएगा, तो ये जो मेरी वोकेशनल एजुकेशन है वो उस काम को करेगा कि बचपन से ही वो इंटर्नशिप करेगा। उद्योग हो, चाहे वो कृषि हो, चाहे फल हो, चाहे वो जड़ी बूटी का हो, चाहे वो स्थानीय आधार पर शहरों के तमाम प्रकार की समस्याएं हैं, उन समस्याओं जोड़कर उस पर शोध करके और फिर तैयार करेगा, वो अपने को हर हालत में तैयार करेगा। और इसलिए वो आत्मनिर्भर बन सके, इस दिशा में शुरू से ये कोशिश रहेगी। और फिर ऊपर आते हुए आपने देखा कि अभी हम IIIT में हमने क्या ऐसे PPP मॉडल लाए, जिसमें 50% केंद्र सरकार होगी, 35% राज्य सरकार का हिस्सा होगा, 15% उद्योग होंगे। उद्योग अभी तक क्या था, हम आईआईटी, एनआईटी या जो बड़े थे वो जो पढ़ा रहे थे वो कदाचित उद्योगों को की आवश्यकता नहीं होती थी, जो उद्योगों की आवश्यकता थी वो इधर नहीं होता था। अब हमने इन दोनों को जोड़ा है, हम कृषि से भी जोड़ेंगे अपनी प्रतिभाओं को। अभी आपने देखा कि युक्त पोर्टल हमने बनाया, जितने भी शोध और अनुसंधान इस कोविड काल में हुए, अद्भुत अनुसंधान किए मेरे छात्रों ने, शोध छात्रों ने, मेरे अध्यापकों ने। और ऐसी स्थिति में युक्ति 2 पर हजारों लाखों आइडियाज है, ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बना दिया कि जो मेरे छात्र का आइडिया किसान ले सकता है, उद्योगपति ले सकता है, उद्यानपति ले सकता है, कोई भी गांव का ले सकता है, शहर का ले सकता है। वो जो छात्र है उसकी प्रतिभा उस उद्योग पर, उस क्षेत्र में, उस चीजों पर जब जाएगी तो पढ़ते पढ़ते उस उद्योग को भी खड़ा करेगा और अपने आप भी समर्थ होता चला जाएगा। यदि लघु उद्योग की दिशा में 5 करोड़ से भी अधिक लघु उद्योग हैं, मेरा एक एक छात्र एक एक लघु उद्योग में जाकर अपनी पूरी मस्तिष्क का उपयोग करेगा, उसको बढ़ाएगा, तो कितने लोगों को रोजगार देगा। इसलिए देश के प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा हैकाथॉन लगातार होना चाहिए। आपको मालूम है कि अभी कुछ ही दिन पहले स्मार्ट इंडिया हैकाथॉन हमने किया, अभी कुछ दिन पहले हमने पिछले वर्ष हमने किया था सिंगापुर इंडिया हैकाथॉन किया था, हमने अभी औषधि ढूंढो हैकाथॉन किया था, अभी आपको मालूम है कि जो खिलौना का हैकाथॉन इसीलिए तो किया कि जो खिलौने हैं इस देश में लगभग 10,500 करोड़ का खिलौने की आपूर्ति होती है और जिसमें 80% विदेश से आता है, जबकि पूरी दुनिया में 7 लाख करोड़ की मार्केट है केवल खिलौने की। ये देश इतना बड़ा देश है, प्रतिभा की कमी नहीं है, आइडियाज की कमी नहीं है, हम पूरी दुनिया की उस मार्केट पर छा सकते हैं। इसलिए अभी हमने इसके लिए भी एक हैकाथॉन किया, जो स्कूली बच्चे से लेकर के और ऊपर आईआईटी तक के सारे बच्चे किस तरीके के खिलौने, खेल खेल में हम शिक्षा के माध्यम से क्या कर सकते हैं, अपने संस्कृति को भी, अपने इतिहास को भी, अपनी परंपराओं को भी, अपने ज्ञान को भी, अपने विज्ञान को उसके माध्यम से बच्चे तक कैसे करके पहुंचा सकते हैं। एक पंथ 2 काम होंगे। और इसलिए अभी हम लोगों ने आसियान देशों के साथ हैकाथॉन किया, 10 आसियान देशों के साथ हिंदुस्तान हैकाथॉन कर रहा है और प्रतिस्पर्धा नहीं कर रहा है, मिल करके कुछ नई चीज कर रहा है, मिल करके। तो इसलिए ये जो आप जिस बात को आपने कहा कि क्या वो समर्थ होने की दिशा में, आत्मनिर्भर बनने की दिशा में, उसके लिए चारों तरफ ऐसा मैदान खाली हो रहा है, जहां दौड़ना चाहता है, जहां करना चाहता है, ऐसी परिस्थितियां पैदा की जा रही है। और शोध और अनुसंधान की दिशा में नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन 50,000 करोड़ की लागत से 50,000 करोड़ से नेशनल रिसर्च फाउंडेशन शोध और अनुसंधान कराएगा। बहुत बड़ी बात होगी, क्योंकि अभी तक जो दौड़ थी, पैकेज की दौड़ थी विदेश में या कहीं भी, अब पेटेंट की दौड़ हुई। जिस दिन पेटेंट की दौड़ होगी उस दिन अपनी चीजों को खड़ा करेगा और वो स्टार्टअप तैयार करके अपने आप समृद्ध होता चला जाएगा। मुझे भरोसा है कि मेरी नई शिक्षा नीति 2020 न केवल देश के प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा कि 21वीं सदी का स्वर्णिम भारत चाहिए, उस 21वीं सदी के स्वर्णिम भारत की आधारशिला है। ये नेशनल भी है, इंटरनेशनल भी है, इम्पैक्टफुल है, इंटरैक्टिव भी है, इंक्लूसिव भी है, इनोवेटिव भी है, और ये इक्विटी, क्वालिटी और एक्सेस की आधारशिला खड़ी है। ये इसमें कंटेंट भी है, इसमें पेटेंट भी है। हम टैलेंट का विकास भी करेंगे, विस्तार भी करेंगे, और टैलेंट को हम उत्कृष्ट कोटि के कंटेंट के साथ जोड़ करके पेटेंट निकालेंगे। ये शिक्षा नीति निश्चित भारत को आत्मनिर्भर भारत और भारत को विश्व गुरु भारत के बनाने के रास्ते को प्रशस्त करेगी, ऐसा मेरा भरोसा है। मैं आपको बहुत बधाई देना चाहता हूं। आप ये जो संवाद किया है आपने, इससे निश्चित रूप में देश के अंदर, दुनिया के अंदर एक अच्छा वातावरण होगा। मैं आयोजकों को इसके शिक्षा मंत्री होने के नाते बधाई देता हूँ। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, sir. Now we will proceed with our first session of the day. The topic for the same is NEP, a new approach to education. In this session, we will take a deep dive into the new education policy and explore how the use of technology can help in building a strong foundation for the next generation in the 21st century. To start the discussion, we have opening remarks by Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan, a former ISRO Chairman and Head of Drafting Committee of NEP.
Honorable Dr. Ramesh Pokhriyal, and other distinguished invitees. I am delighted to be speaking at the India Education Summit organized by the Indian Express and Google for Education on the topic NEP, the new approach to education. The vision of India's new educational system, as enunciated in the NEP, has been crafted to ensure that it touches the life of each and every citizen, consistent with their needs and necessities and their aspirations, besides creating a just and equitable society. I may add that this policy in its final stages was reviewed very critically by the Honorable Prime Minister Sri Modi ji. He further declared that this policy will be implemented in letter and spirit to usher India into a vibrant knowledge society, driving its economic, social, and other developmental goals. Presently, under the dynamic visionary leadership of the Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Ramesh Pokhriyal ji, this policy is under initial stages of implementation with its own unique challenges. As suggested by the organizers, I shall provide a brief account of the spirit and rationale behind creating a new structure through NEP in my introductory remarks. This will be followed by summary highlights of the restructured new 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 school education system, the role of digital in creating a robust structure, and focusing specifically on developing vocational skills. India, over the next decade, will have the highest population of young people in the world, more than 50% below 35 years of age, aspiring for high quality education. This demographic dividend has to be taken advantage of globalization and demands of a knowledge economy and knowledge society. Call for emphasis on the need for acquisition of new skills for the learners on a regular basis for them to learn how to learn and become lifelong learners. A critical consideration that needs to be addressed appropriately. The changes in the knowledge landscape, especially science and technology advances in big data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all demand skilled workforce involving mathematics, computer science, data science, as well as multidisciplinary abilities across the sciences, social sciences, and humanities. Further, the education of the future needs to be reconfigured in order to meet the goals of the Global Education Development Agenda, the Goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, that seeks to ensure inclusion and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. With this last education policy formulated nearly 30 years back, India now needs an educational system aligned with aspirational goals of the 21st century education while remaining rooted to India's value system and ethos. The vision of the new educational policy has been crafted to ensure that it touches the life of each and every citizen, consistent with their needs and necessities, besides creating a just and equitable society. NEP 2020 provides an integrated yet flexible approach to education. Further, it has kept the interconnectedness of the various phases of education in mind, and how the same will enable continuity, coherence, and processes to ultimately realize an end to end educational roadmap for the country. An articulation of a broad view of education encompassing the holistic development with special emphasis on kindling of the creative potential of each individual in all its richness and complexity has grown increasingly popular in the recent years. The policy thus aims at the development of the 21st century skills for the students while giving enough flexibility in making their choices. The policy has recommended transformative changes in the way school education needs to be configured in the contemporary times. Advances in the developmental, cognitive, and educational psychology have considerably influenced our thinking about how we need to address the teaching learning processes of the youngsters in their early childhood. Thus, the change of the 10 plus 2 design to the expanded 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 structure is based on our better understanding of the scientific basis, which provides insights of the child's learning trajectory from birth to the secondary school. Between the ages of 3 to 14, the children gradually transition from perceptual learning to conceptual learning, and then on to the prescriptive learning, and finally abstraction. Coming to the role of digital, I shall first enunciate the policy related to the broader question of educational technology as a part of its integration into all levels of education. Broadly, this can be under four categories, that is, improving teaching, learning, and evaluation, supporting teacher preparation and continuous teacher professional development, enhancing educational access to disadvantaged groups, and streamlining education planning, administration, and management. I may specifically emphasize the impact aspect of teachers training through educational technology. The digital systems, a critical component of the education technology, have important issues related to the digital divide. The problem is indeed severe, but during the pandemic, state governments have worked hard and successfully combined the use of a mix of radio, television, mobile technology, as well as home delivery of printing material, learning materials to the children who did not have other means of access. This is commendable and the right way to go till such time as everyone gets access to the technology. The learning from this experience will go a long way in building out future technology solutions. I hope that as a part of the implementation of the NEP 2020, educational institutions will be given access to both connectivity and the devices so that students can use them at least at school, if not at home. Students who cannot afford devices can also be given a one time grant of either tablets or smartphones. The online medium has a special advantage that is not available in face to face teaching, namely access to recordings of lectures either before or after the classes. This not only enables interesting models of education, such as flipped classrooms or blended mode of teaching learning, where students listen to the lecture before class and use the class time for discussions with their teachers and fellow students. But these recordings of lectures offer important new possibility of reinforcement of learning through repeated watching of the lectures as and when the need arises. The NPTL, I'm sure many of you know about this project in India, in which professors from IIT recorded their lectures and put it online, is being sustained use from students around the world who turn to them regularly as and when they need clarifications of the concepts. There are two key experiences from COVID. First, we need a far more robust educational system that can function to at least to some extent the face of a crisis such as COVID. Digital education is likely to be an important pillar in providing that robustness. Second, we need far greater understanding, teacher training, and tooling to leverage digital technologies for education. A key inadequacy today is the absence of a common platform for educators, technologists, and educated tech researchers to get together and articulate educational challenges, develop potential solutions, and evaluate their efficacy in specific contexts. Thus, The policy calls for creating the National Educational Technology Forum, NETF, an autonomous body that will bring these otherwise disparate stakeholders together and spearhead their effort. Results from a recent survey by the ranking agency, Pekali months, show that 72.6% of over 7,500 students surveyed use mobile phone hotspots to access the internet, a solution that is considered to be a low tech by UNESCO. Only 15.87% students surveyed had broadband access, but even these responses faced poor connectivity, power availability, and signal issues. Of those using mobile hotspots, nearly 97% face poor connectivity or signal issues. They put these figures in perspective. It's important to remember that only 30% of the Indian population have access to smartphones. The use of TV channels for education, a technology with the deepest reach, is also not really a panacea, given that only 67% of households have the access. Now, about developing vocational skills, which goes beyond textbooks oriented schooling. Children need to develop multiple skills, not just verbal and mathematical skills, but also motor skills, social skill, calisthenic dance and movement, that means, and so on. On the industry front, the fact that only less than 5% of our students have formal vocational training related to 52% in US or 76% in Germany means that many industries have a shortage of trained people, even as young people are searching for jobs. This is a sad situation for both the economy as well as for livelihoods of families. Introducing vocational education during the school years will help to introduce students to their own interests and strengths and help match their aspirations. In the end, I would like to thank the organizers once more for this opportunity to share my own thoughts on the NEP 2020 in this August forum. I wish the deliberations the best of success. I now hand over this for discussions to D. Banu Dhawan of Google and to carry forward the discussion. Thank you very much.
Namaskar, everyone. Welcome to the India Education Summit. Thank you, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, for your thoughts on NEP. We're going to talk about NEP, a new approach to education in this panel. And I have with me Mr. Ramanan Ramanathan, Mission Director, Atal Innovation Mission, Additional Secretary at Niti Aayog, Ashish Dhawan, Founder and Chairman, Central Square Foundation, and Ms. Rukmini Banerjee, CEO, Pratham. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to start this panel discussion with you, Mr. Ramanan. We've heard from the finance minister yesterday about, creating of these 15,000 model schools. NEP is front and center in terms of the big changes that we want to bring and the strong foundation we want to build for the next generation of our students. I would like to hear from you on what do you believe is this blended learning approach that is being talked about post-COVID, and how can schools, especially government schools, take it forward to achieve NEP goals of learning outcomes and 21st century skills?
Thank you, Rani, for that very, very important question. And I think the policy, the budget that was announced was very well aligned with the initiatives that the government has been taking related to education, skill development, and promoting research and innovation across the country. And obviously, the NEP 2020, which was introduced last year, towards the end of last year, it has been a game-changing policy, and which is really targeted to how do you tap this young demographic dividend that we talk about, which is the envy of many a country across the world, with more than 150 million young students entering into the workplace, with more than 1.4 million schools, 10,500 engineering and related institutions, and 39,000 colleges. How do you transform this young, energetic potential that we have into a workforce that can transform the nation and which can drive our nation towards continuous improvement, not only from an economic point of view, but from a societal point of view. And therefore, in that context, the NEP had introduced a number of measures which basically focus on transforming a rote learning mindset to a problem-solving, innovative, entrepreneurial mindset in our young students. It had the characteristics of how do you make it inclusive, considering the breadth of our country, 715 districts, 650,000 villages, and our students come from all over the country. How do you also make sure that you are able to focus on creating new models, empowering students on emerging technologies? So the Atal Innovation Mission that we have been doing for the last couple of years has been sort of a forerunner to what NEP has tried to encapsulate in its policy. We have latest technologies like 3D printing, robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, which are changing the shape of the world. And how do you ensure that you build a cadre of schools who are becoming model schools in being able to absorb and assimilate these changes that are happening in the technology world and integrate them into mainstream education from an applied learning point of view? Because we have been learning theory and in the class, a lot of focus on physics, chemistry, maths, but how do you apply all of this knowledge into actual innovations, into problem solving? And therefore, the NEP has been a forerunner in being able to set the policy framework. Now, the budget of this particular year has actually built upon that entire thing. And I thought a number of initiatives which they have talked about are very important. One is the 15,000 model schools that we are talking about, because that is going to set the basis and it can act as a hub and spoke model for being able to spread best practices in education from one school to all the neighboring schools. The second is there has been a tremendous emphasis on the national professional standard for teachers, because if you're talking of an NEP, we also have to make sure that our teachers come up to speed, and there has to be a standardization in professional growth of the teachers. So there is a organization which has been set up, and two initiatives, the NISTA initiative as well as the NPST initiative, are very key in educating and training more than 92 lakh teachers in the NPST system, and in the NISTA about 56 lakh teachers are going to be trained. So that's the second part. The third part is the Ekalavya schools that are being set up across the country, 750 Ekalavya schools, and more importantly, more than 36,000 crores have been allocated for promoting education, inclusive education in the SC/ST community. And this is a very important step in making sure that no part of the country and no part of the demographic dividend is neglected. And finally, the NDR, or the National Digital Education Architecture, a platform is being made available for governance, teaching, as well as for standardization. And this is going to play a very important role, because digital learning, digital transformation in education, edtech startups, these are all going to play a very important role in the months going ahead. So I think overall the budget has focused on the right expenditure on the right areas to promote a very vibrant, problem-solving, innovative, and entrepreneurial group of initiatives to initiate our young students to transform India.
Great. I'm going to come to you, Ashish. Obviously, NEP has set us some tall goals, and we are talking about new pedagogical practices, new curriculum structures. Are our schools ready? Given that a few handful of private schools probably will be able to adopt, I'd love to hear from you on, are our schools ready, and how do organizations like Central Square Foundation help the government in this path?
Yeah, I think, look, NEP, most of us agree, is a landmark document. I think it sets the vision for the next 20 years and at least points us in the right direction. From my standpoint, and I think Rukmini will agree with me, I think the focus on early childhood and on foundational learning is critical in NEP. And I just want to remind us that the document says it's our number one priority, that we need to make change by 2025. So it's time bound, and that nothing else can be achieved unless we make progress with foundational learning. So I think that's critical. Now, in order to achieve that, a number of things need to fall into place. One of which is looking at the curriculum. And I'm glad recently Rukmini's colleague from Pratham and I had the chance to present to a parliamentary standing committee on this. Is I think with the curriculum, it's not that our schools can't absorb it. It's just that right now, and Rukmini's been talking about this for a long time, we have an overambitious curriculum. If you look at our textbooks, I'm staggered that children in class 3 we make demands off of them that frankly I would struggle with. Or my child in private school in 3rd grade would struggle with. And we need to recognize the reality of where our children are. So I think if we're realistic and pragmatic, and we have a real focus, this becomes a priority. The government now is putting this into a mission. Funds are being earmarked. I think the goals will be clearly defined. There'll be some monitoring around it. It's really going to be up to states to take it up now and drive it thereafter. So I'm just heartened by the fact that NEP has set the priorities right. And now the government is putting this into mission mode, is creating the budgets, etc. And many of the other architectural elements will fall into place. But a lot of hard work will have to take place on the behalf of state governments to pull this off. And many NGOs will need to provide support from the outside to help build capacity, to help with the tools, the teaching learning material, etc. going forward. But there's a certain momentum now that I think we have. And I don't think this is related to the budget. I mean, the money was always there. There's some money that needs to be earmarked. That's happening. It's more the prioritization and putting this into mission mode that I'm excited about.
Great. Rukmini, over to you then. How is Pratham, supporting these goals when we talk about, are our schools ready? So how do you actually work closely with the schools? And more specifically, how can NEP goals be realized in government schools?
I think that, I'm like Ashish and like many other people, I'm very excited about the direction of the NEP and also the very clear articulation of goals. The most important thing, according to me, in the NEP is the little box which says that if you don't achieve foundational learning by grade 3, the rest of the policy is irrelevant. And I think that that's such a clear statement of what needs to be done. As Pratham, we have been facilitating the annual status of education report since 2005. And since 2005, we've been saying that foundational learning, reading, and basic arithmetic is absolutely the core. So it's taken 15 years, but in the history of India, 15 years is not that long a time. And I think that along with stating this and doing this ASAR survey in every district in India for 15 years, the tools that we have help everybody, even illiterate parents, sarpanch, teachers, to understand what this means. Because a goal can be a goal, but if it's not very clear in front of you. So in that sense, I would say that there is some preparedness about how you take a goal like this and make it possible for everyone to really understand what that means, whether you're educated or not. Because a large number of our children who are in elementary school today have parents who are, may not have that much education. Now, as long with the ASAR report, which came out with both the data and the tools and a very large scale way of measuring it every year, we also worked on the solution. So if you have children who are in standard 3, 4, 5 or above and are not able to read, what can you do? Because there is need for speed there, right? If you are not able to pick up these foundational skills, then the rest of the curriculum will remain out of your reach. And if you look at the data carefully, it shows a couple of things. One is, and this is over so many years, it shows that the basic levels are worryingly low. Second, that if you don't fix this early, it's much more difficult to fix it later. And a third thing is that there is huge variation across the country on this. So there are states where a very large number of children in grade 3 are, 3 years below grade level. And there are other states where this is not the case. So we have to deal with this variation in India. So for about, more than 10 years as Pratham, we've been working on what is the solution that can be frugal, that can be low cost, and that can be effective in building basic reading and arithmetic. And we've had quite a bit of success, both working directly. We work in about anywhere, depending on the year, between 5 to 10,000 villages and schools directly where this growth can be shown. Because you need to believe that fast progress is possible. And the approach that we use is called teaching at the right level, which means start where the child is. It's exactly what we all do at home with our own children. You start where the child is and work with the children to move into where they need to be. And how do you do this on scale? How do you do this with the existing resources? Are things that we've worked at. Over the last, I would say, we've done this for a number of years in different states, but over the last 2 years, the results from where you work in partnership with school systems, like UP or Karnataka or Chhattisgarh or big Bihar, big school systems, you see that when there is a focused effort put on this within a school system, from the top all the way down to the school level, and you allow teachers to put the curriculum aside and work on these foundational skills, in a short period of time, 2 to 3 months, you can see a 20-25 percentage point improvement in children's basic ability to read or to do arithmetic. So I also feel that there is enough evidence within India, there is experience. What we need to do is to make it high priority. And high priority means high priority. We know how to do things in a campaign mode. We have experiences of that. We know how to do things very well in short bursts. How do you bring that into and I think it's even more needed this year than ever before because of, the whole of the last year. So as Pratham, we have always been ready and are also working with state governments, with other NGOs, for example, there are a lot of panchayats in the country who feel that while the district or the state may take a decision, there are a lot of young district collectors who almost can't wait for the state to make up its mind. They want to go ahead on this. And I think making this a national mission makes it possible for all forces to come together. And the last thing I'd like to say is that during this COVID period, we are now working directly in about 10,000 villages. And we see a lot of support from youth volunteers in these villages. The NEP allows and I think celebrates bringing forces like that together as well. Because really, our entire future depends on the success of this one goal. If we don't, in the next 5 years, manage to create these strong foundations, the buildings we build on it will not be durable, will not be high. So I hope I've made my case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, between government and the partnerships with organizations such as Pratham and Central Square Foundation, we have a long way to go. So I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Ramanan, from a Niti Aayog perspective. How will you be able to help states, especially those states that haven't really been able to move the needle or are still remain challenged to actually, impact that foundational level literacy? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So the Niti Aayog, as all of us are aware, is the National Institution for Transforming India. And if they don't introduce initiatives which can really transform, different parts of the country, it would not be the right thing. And that's what the Niti Aayog now has been focusing for the last several years, very effectively, I would say, in being able to ensure through a number of initiatives that education, skill development, innovation spreads across the country in multiple parts. And let me start off with what the Atal Innovation Mission itself does, because that has been one of the very flagship initiatives of the Government of India under the Niti Aayog, where we have been setting up thousands of tinkering labs across the country in schools. And to date, more than 10,000 tinkering labs have been established, out of which 7,200 are fully operational. And each lab is a dedicated innovation workspace where young students between grade 6 to grade 12, so I'm not talking of foundational thinking, which has already been elaborated quite a bit by both Rukmini ji and Ashish. We are talking about grade 6 to grade 12, where the young students get involved in tinkering with technology, playing with it in an atmosphere of fun and learning how to, through do-it-yourself kits on 3D printing, robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, augmented virtual reality, start creating solutions for problems they see in and around the community. Now, you may think, what is the innovation that's going to come out of it? But that's not the idea. The idea is to create a problem-solving, innovative mindset, rather than just a rote learning mindset, get good marks, go to a good university, get good marks again, go to a university abroad, and get good marks again and join a job in IBM, TCS, Google, or Wipro. how do you transform that to creating problem solvers and thereby creating a nation of job creators and innovators? That's the larger vision and the larger goal. So towards that end, one of the important things that we have done is 70% of the Atal Tinkering Labs that are established in government and government-aided schools. 70% of them are in non-tier 1 cities, and 70% of them are girls and co-ed schools. And out of the 115 aspirational districts that we have, 108 of them have Atal Tinkering Labs. And each Atal Tinkering Lab is actually accessible to a number of other schools, neighboring schools, so that they are able to bring the benefit of that knowledge and tinkering and innovation capability into the young students. Now, one of the very important things that at least I have seen in the last couple of years, because I come from the private sector and this has been my first introduction into the government as a mission director here, one of the important things that I've seen is the amazing enthusiasm with which these young students go to the tinkering labs, not just during school hours. I mean, they have allocated school hours during which they can go and play around with all these technologies, but beyond, they're there on the weekends, they're there after school hours, because this is something like Lego. Introduce Lego to a small child, they start doing plug and play and they enjoy the game. So also in technology and new initiatives like this. And the other thing is we have also introduced critical thinking, design thinking at different levels. I mean, it's not associated only with the elite school. Some of the best innovations have come from places like Bilaspur and Sikkim and Salem and Thoothukudi and so on. Girls' school in Thoothukudi have created a solar panel IoT-based irrigation management system and so on. So what essentially we are doing is ensuring that all the schools will get the benefit of this. And similarly, as Rukmini pointed out, we realize that there is a gap in the teacher's knowledge as well as the ability of people to induct them into problem solving and design thinking. So we enlisted a group of volunteer mentors. I'm very happy to say that more than 10,000 mentors across the country have registered as mentors of change to Atal Innovation Mission, and they're all allocated to these tinkering labs and schools and so on. And an ATL is a typical idea of implementing NEP. We are actually in close discussion with the School of Education. The second thing that Niti Aayog has been doing is the aspirational district program that we have. As you are aware, 115 of our 715 districts are called as aspirational districts. We are at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of access to basic healthcare, education, hygiene, waste management, and so on. So this program has rolled out across the country very, very strongly under the backing of the Honorable Prime Minister. And we are ensuring that education and hygiene and awareness, it's not just education which is important here. It is healthcare, nourishment for many of those kids. They don't have proper food to eat. They are not nourished. 1 in 3 infant mortality, 1 in 4 infant stunting, and 1 in 5 maternal mortality in these districts. Unless you address that problem holistically, education is not going to go ahead. So these are all multiple initiatives that the Niti Aayog is doing, and we are now looking at how you can leverage the power of digital transformation and digital technology in revolutionizing the edtech world.
Thank you. So Ashish, over to you. In fact, two very important areas of under NEP where technology is an enabler has been access to internet and blended learning, and the second is to have a more structured approach to e-content. Now, the debate that we often hear about in the blended learning space is that are the interiors of India actually, do they have the right infrastructure to even enable that kind of blended learning? And if they do, what's the e-content strategy that will support a teacher? So we know of Diksha, we know of Swayam, but obviously we need to take it to the next level, a version 2, where the reality of blended learning is realized. So according to you, how can, in spite of all the funds being allocated to get to the last government schools, how do we ensure that we reach the right set of schools, both on the content side and the infrastructure side?
Yeah, so I think with EdTech, a lot has been said, and obviously during COVID times, we've also seen that we've had to resort to some form of EdTech, but also that this is by no means a perfect solution. That there was a lot of downside actually in and children struggled, and there were real access issues during this period. I think the whole B2G side, which is machines in schools and children spending time, I think India is far away from figuring out that model. We've had an ICT at schools program for years. It has not been very effective. The penetration levels are still quite low. And I think we struggle with all kinds of issues, from procurement to how do you select the right software, to ensuring that these are maintained well, that you schedule this appropriately, the teacher is trained to know how to integrate this into the teaching learning process. So I think it's been a real challenge, if you ask me. I mean, there are some good products that actually have tried experiments, but we're still in experiment mode right now. And most of the devices out there, frankly, there's very little impact in terms of the teaching learning process. I think the B2C side, which is going direct to the home, more of that has happened during COVID, obviously. And I think as Asar's survey showed, the WhatsApp penetration now is at 61% in rural India. It's probably 90+% in urban India. I think there is a real access issue, though. I mean, when you look at states like Madhya Pradesh, or even better states like Delhi from a penetration standpoint, during COVID times, even the access was either in the teens, or a quarter of students were accessing content. Places like Delhi were a little bit better, Kerala was better, etc. I think it's going to improve going forward. And I think there are two distinct opportunities. One is this issue of home learning. The fact that teachers are now connected with parents. Parents can be more engaged. And we can extend, if a child is doing something in the classroom, they can now watch a video at home, some practice questions, there's some optional stuff. There's still an access issue in terms of making it universally available. So we need an omni-channel approach in the near term. But in sort of a longer term time frame, through shared devices in the community, etc., there's an opportunity there. And I think the other opportunity is within the system itself. All teachers have a smartphone. How can we leverage technology for teachers to get, continuous professional development? I'm not saying it's all going to be online, but some form of blended thing. The physical plus some continuous professional development as well. So I think there's some use cases where technology can play a role, where it's integrated into the teaching learning process. But on its own, either in the school system or even at home, I think there's an opportunity for children to self-learn. But the issue with those self-learning tools is the adoption and engagement levels are very, very poor. And so I'm not convinced that we can drive that very easily unless it's built into some kind of program.
Got that. So Rukmini, from your perspective, how do you select some of the villages that you actually work with? And in the context of blended learning, have you seen any rate of improvement because technology has enabled an environment where there is democratization of access, and there is more available for the child to self-learn and, increase their literacy, numeracy level? If you could just speak to your learnings in the space.
So I have to say that, we cannot say that it was a good thing COVID happened. That would be absolutely horrible and awful. But I think it has forced us to try a lot of new things and learn. One of the key learnings that we are coming away with, that in any village where we worked, we had in-school activities during the school time, but we always formed groups of kids who would do projects. I mean, not as far perhaps as the Atal mission vision, but small projects together. And usually, kind of shepherded or just mentored, coached lightly by an older brother or sister or a parent and so on. And we did the same with the younger children. We always have mothers groups. So we work a lot with Anganwadis. In your neighborhood, there'll be a small group. The same kids that you play with are the kids that you sit together. And part of this was really to encourage kind of collaboration and, being connected to your environment. In some of these villages, so let's say we were doing this pre-COVID in about 6,000 villages. In about 2,000, there were some shared devices, tabs.
Yeah.
But groups had to share it because there was only like 4 or 5 devices. But that made children decide who would be in the group, how would they share it, what would be a good time to meet. So, we very deliberately kept it non-instructional. You had a group, you chose your project, you charted your pathway, even if the project was something like collecting music from your village, where the tab actually played a role in, triggering some of these activities. So when COVID hit, we could lean back on these groups. Now, many of them were not connected. These were not online groups. Sometimes they had devices, sometimes they didn't. But the social structure existed. And to Mr. Ramanan's point, the slightly older kids, we don't work all the way, we don't work on very large scale with much older kids. But the upper primary kids, class 6, 7, 8, were able to actually get together, and it was right in their neighborhood. So what we've seen is a kind of I would like to think of an Indian rural notion of blended learning, which had a lot of human interaction based on the social structures of the groups of kids, often helped by an adult. Sometimes it was a teacher, sometimes a parent. And if they had access to projects, the projects could be sent even through SMS. We've done a lot of SMS work in this time, but there was some direction. And we also did a lot of follow-up through the phone. So we send out 3 lakh messages a day, even today. And each one of these messages, at least once a fortnight, gets a phone call to say, how was the last week? What did you do? Did you have any trouble? Here's my number. Call me back. So to me, the blended is the human and whatever kind of device you have access to right now. Yeah. And often it is a radio program and an SMS, TV program, and somebody sending something on WhatsApp. And having the right social structures, to me, a huge part of how we need to get ready is to learn how to collaborate. Collaborate between parents and teachers, collaborate among friends. We seem to do that without any training when we play cricket in the field. It's exactly that is what we need to actually learn together. And, it has been, we are trying to systematize some of the learnings because those who have smartphones at home are often also those who have other kinds of advantages. Yeah. So in a way, anybody whose parent didn't have a smartphone are the kids who need the most help right now. And if they are embedded in a social structure where somebody in the group's parents have a smartphone, at least for now, you can move a little bit. So to me, blended learning is trying all these methods, but making sure it lands on a solid social structure of children, of mothers groups, being able to nurture these groups, having an opportunity and celebrating and maybe certifying the youth who've been helping. So we run something called an education for education. So if you as a youth are willing to give a little bit of time for the children in your village, then what can be given to you? Because to those kids, it is possible to give things online much more easily than to the younger kids. Yeah. So these are all the, many things, we need time to kind of digest. Otherwise, this is all just so many things that are happening. But I would say that I feel Indian education between the NEP and the things we've had to do during COVID has taken us to a very interesting point. And that we need to take the time. And there's been a lot more openness within the government system, within schools to say, we all need help. And I think a third thing that has happened very interestingly is that we are a country of divisions and we know it. But somehow this reaching the last child has become more of a high priority because we were very aware that technology wasn't reaching the last child. Yeah. So this equity angle, I think, hopefully is here right at the center of what we are doing. These different experiments that have been done, we are going to need to use low tech for a large number of people and then think about, and I have a great faith in these shared devices, collective goods. And I don't understand why we can't think of a shared set of devices for every village, which during school time could be used by rotating groups of kids, otherwise could be used for health or something like that, because we are not going to be able to have, a device in everyone's hand anytime soon. And so how do you move forward iteratively, spreading as much as you can, spreading the benefits of this, in a very systematic way as you go, and then build on that. So build a foundation for connecting people and then build the building on that. It's all foundation.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick up on that cricket example and say, talk about the renewed energy, the self-reliance that we're talking about, ambitious India. And I'm going to come back to Dr. Raman. And I'm going to, in fact, open this question for each of you to talk about. The way that I look at it is that, there are certain pillars that we will have to address collectively for this, vision that we have of a self-reliant education system and digitally empowered. because we have to support the NEP goal as an enabler, as a technology enabler. So one of the pillars is, of course, what we talked about as infrastructure. There is teacher capacity as the second pillar, and we all know how important that is. But there are two other, pillars that I'd like your thoughts on. One is, how do we actually provide a more equitable platform? Diksha and Swayam are being thought of as those large platforms that can house content, will be able to do assessments at scale, etc. But what I feel is a gap is the fourth pillar, which is the e-content side, or the content strategy that we need to figure out, so that there is this democratization that we are envisaging. So to you, Mr. Ramandan, then if you could talk a bit about, is Niti Aayog going to play a role in actually devising a strategy or a structure? How can we actually take up this problem at scale and solve it at scale?
Yeah, thanks, Rani. And I think it's a very important point, because we are a country with, like I said, 715 districts and several languages. Every state has its own language. So first and foremost, the language issue has to be addressed to be able to disseminate education in local languages and not just rely upon English or a few languages to be able to disseminate that. And I think the NLTM, which has been set up, the National Language Translation Mission, in this regard, and which was announced in the budget, is a very, very important initiative, because this sets the tone for what is required.
Sure. So we are on time. I will have to wrap this up, but Ashish, Rukmini, if you'd like to add on, how can technology support NEP goals, and specifically to the content piece, and then we would probably wrap this session up.
If I can just say a little bit about this, I think we should think about content. It has an E form and it has a physical form. And therefore, there are lots of people who may not be that skilled at the E part, but have so I'll give you an example. We have a lot of music groups who are now providing content. We have 3 layers of content that we look at, both E and otherwise. One is called Learning for School, which is all the academic stuff, which a lot of people are investing in. Then there is Learning for Work, which I think increasingly in the skilling space people are going for. But a vast majority of people are interested in what I call learning for life. Music, art, sport, health, lots of things that during COVID we didn't, you wanted to have access to. So the way we look at it is to say there are a lot of interesting things happening in India. You may have the E capability or not, but you need a bridging place where you can come together. We know how to, create into smaller modules, I think everything for the next 5 years has to be able to go on WhatsApp. So short things, you can have 10 short things. And how can you bring a lot of people who are not necessarily technologically oriented to say, I have content, can I come to you, Bani? You know technology, and you know how to put it all together. And we need to have a lot of open spaces on which to upload it. A very quick one, Story Weaver is a platform that is associated with Pratham Books. We contributed to it heavily. And we've now decided that if children really in India learn to read, you're going to have 250 million children wanting stories every night. We need that kind of volume of stories. And so we set out this thing saying in the next 6 months, 1,000 stories in every regional language. And, there's no lack of people who can write stories. You have to just review them, clean them up, know how to upload it, move fast. And I think it can be done.
Absolutely. The context of learning is what we're talking about, that if you are in your, in your village or in your cities, and you can associate with the kind of learning in your own language, whether technology enabled or otherwise, in the form of books, which is an amazing form of learning. I think that's the key. So thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to an interesting session. So thank you. With that, we wrap up the session. Namaskar.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers. And now we move on to the second session of the day, titled Asynchronous Learning, a Driving Force Post the Pandemic. In this session, we will explore how asynchronous learning enables deeper learning for students, moderated by Roshan Pavaiya, editor, Financial Express Digital. The session will have Soumya Narayanan, Head Center of Excellence in Venture Academy, Sumita Ghosh, Head EdTech Experiential Learning Systems, the Heritage Schools, Pramod Tripathi, Director Academics, Global Indian International School, Singapore, and Ashutosh Bhatta, Chairman, Bloom Public School. Over to you, Roshan.
Thanks for it. Thanks for the introduction. And I think the pandemic has taught us quite a few lessons, literally, even in changing the whole way we attend school. And I think there's been like a forced shift from the regular classroom system to a system which is a mix of both synchronous learning when you're online and talking to your teacher, and asynchronous learning, because I've seen the number of assignments and research projects and all that going up. So I'm happy to be talking to such an esteemed panel. Mr. Pramod Tripathi, who's the Associate Director at Global Indian School, Singapore. Sumita Ghosh, who's Head of EdTech, Experiential Learning Systems. Lorraine Fazal, who's the Founding Managing Trustee at Inventure Academy. And Ashutosh Bhatta, who's the Chairman of Bloom Public School, who's joining us right now. So, I mean, I just wanted to ask you all, probably starting with Pramod. Um, this whole pandemic, did you see like when you shifted to an asynchronous, was there a shift from a synchronous system of learning to an asynchronous system of learning?
Good morning, everyone. Definitely, there was a big change which has come recently. It's not that the schools or the students were not aware of asynchronous system, but that was always a voluntarily, and it was always an optional. There were certain projects happening where people were coordinating and associating offline, online, things like that. But COVID has forced us to get into something which was optional into a mandatory setup. So that has that has brought a big change in the whole of this 8 9 months of duration. For Singapore, it started somewhere in the late part of January, and still now we are into not exactly lockdown, but then schools and colleges, they are working into a very restricted mode, both mixed model of online and offline. So this system has brought that something which the COVID has brought us to a place. Things which was not experimented in the past has become a mandatory, and we were forced to move into an asynchronous system of learning. So there's a lot of learning in asynchronous system itself, which was considered that this is not possible. Now the whole globe has accepted that this is the only way to move forward into our systems. So that's the learning from the COVID.
Okay. I'm now going to. I'm sorry, I didn't see Dr. Saumin around here. I was under the impression it was Nurain who was joining. So the next thing I want to ask you with Inventure, how did you all manage to smoothly take the system? Were you all already following a hybrid model before this in the way you all teach?
Thank you, Roshan. It's interesting because I think for the pandemic for us, not just for students, but for teachers, for all of us, it has been like it's like a vertical climb, because we are the kind of school which always valued experiential learning, hands-on learning, students working in groups. And then suddenly we were faced with a pandemic when we had to shut down almost overnight. And this really meant that we as a school have to figure out the online model that's going to work for us, keeping in mind what is it that we value. We're a school that values holistic learning. So as a result, even today, you would find that in our online school, we have sections for sports. We have sections for beyond academics, where students do yoga, they do dance, they do where they have student-led clubs, in which they meet online and they collaborate. So it it was a unprecedented learning in terms of not just understanding platforms and tools, but also trying to figure out what is the right screen time for different sections of school. How do we make sure that students are not just learning content and skills that they need for the grade level, but how are we making sure that as a community, our culture, our identity, everything that we believe in is maintained in this online school, that the online school is an inventure which is an extension of what we have, rather than being a new avatar that we rediscovered just to make sure that learning happens, because for us learning happens everywhere, and we wanted to make sure that we keep that philosophy intact.
Okay. So I want to just take the next question to Smita Ghosh. Now, the asynchronous system of learning means that the teacher, student interaction is fairly limited. It's basically, you give them an assignment and ask them to research and then come back. But that is again a very niche set of students who can actually do this. In the larger scale of things, how do you think this can be, pushed as a bigger system across India?
So, Roshan, I would say that, apart from availability and affordability of asynchronous content, which we spoke about in the previous session, and training of students and teacher to use learning management system and use the asynchronous content, what is primarily important is that we see going blended and use of pacing platform is more than just about technology and availability of content. It's about rethinking of teaching and learning and effectively managing the change over time. So it's need a lot more planning. It may involve restructuring of the school into curriculum developer, teachers, etc. And it needs significant investment in teacher training. So having all this, so you need to think about all these aspects so that we don't go back to the old ways of teaching and
Yeah,
learning.
yeah. In fact, I'm going to take that to Mr. Ashutosh Bhatta. In your school at Bloom Public School, and this would have come as a complete change in the system of learning for your teachers as well, in the way they teach. I mean, having to not see their students physically in the classroom, and I'm sure a lot of teachers have to go through a whole relearning process to shift to an asynchronous system. So, how did that come about for you all at Bloom?
Yeah, thanks, Roshan. Quite a forced situation, but very welcome. And I thought it's quite the need of the hour that we went on to such a system of learning and teaching. Um, we did a small perception survey with teachers just recently, and we found some very interesting readings because being a city school in Southwest Delhi, luckily even our children from the economically weaker sections, the students, they had access to smart gadgets. So we had 100% compliance in terms of broadband and in terms of gadgets. All the teachers were anyway trained, but we did ensure that the training was complete. But the survey revealed that still 35% of the teachers felt that they had to push for asynchronous learning to happen. They had to push, call. In some cases it was quite tough. But surprisingly, there was no gender issue here. I mean, I think the girls and boys had the same kind of problem. So there wasn't that there was more compliance from the girls and less from the boys. That was a very good findings, which is very quite unlike what you normally see in classrooms. The boys are the naughty boys, and they don't. So that was very nice. And the when you come to assessments, there were a lot of problems. But then I think once we spoke with parents saying that in case they do, copy from here and there, because you would send papers, they would write them down, and there was no camera on them because you didn't want to intimidate them in any way. And but we found a lot of good compliance and parental support, critical. Luckily, being in a city, if you look at the ASER report, the parental support is very good till primary, even in the suburbs and the rural areas. But it goes lower as the kids go in higher classes. But fortunately, in the cities, parents have fairly large, good aspirations for the kids, and the kids also have lots of aspirations. So luckily for maybe South Delhi school, with parents being very supportive and having all access to all gadgets and the internet, it's been a very smooth transition, I would say. We have been very, very happy with the transition, and now awaiting whether we can scale this in terms of whether online schooling will be given the recognition and there can be a body to control such schools so that we can scale, but it's been a lovely transition, forced but lovely.
Right. I mean, I think that's the challenge, really, scaling this, because there's a lot of technology involved, and plus there's a whole difference in the system of learning. Like you mentioned, about 35% of your teachers still felt like there should be a classroom kind of interaction. Now, but on the other hand, asynchronous education has the potential to reach much further. I mean, I can give a student an assignment today, and somebody sitting in a village in Tamil Nadu can take 3 days to finish it and then submit it, and then you score them on those fronts. I'm going to take this across to Pramod. Singapore, with the kind of technology that it has and the whole education system that it has over there, I think this would be something where education for all could probably start in major cities first with the asynchronous system. How do you see this going forward?
I take a step back from the place Sir has left. What Indian schools or Indian clients, I'll say most of the schools were looking for, is the existing model of which was a face-to-face kind of a classroom into a new model which was basically online kind of education. What we have to do basically is to change our models. The assessments cannot be the same what it was into a proctored or supervised examination system. The online assessments are a bit different, where you really don't need anyone to supervise them, but every child's answer is different and it is not available on a Google search. And you have a plagiarism system software where you can find it out whether a child has developed the answer on his own, or did it just copied from someplace. Coming back to your question, Mr. Roshan, technology plays a big role, and that's what we need to understand, that if we are into a blended learning model, or if we are into an online schooling system or homeschooling system, which has been tried and tested well in the western many of the countries in west, then we need to change our way we think about this. Definitely during COVID time we were forced to do it, and whatever was available we did. But in Singapore, majority of the schools, they have their own ERP system. It has an integration of number of other apps and tools into the system. So whether it's a face to face, whether it's a teaching face to face, is not a problem. This was a major problem to at an initial stage, because teachers are not into those acting. They are not very good at facing camera. They were conscious about the camera issues. They were conscious about, I mean, their focus gets into a chalkboard or into a whiteboard or a green board. They don't see whether they are facing back to the camera, eyes are contact. So these are certain things which are to be taught to each individual. And we need to make people comfortable into it. Swifting between the two technology, between the usage of apps, how can you develop a quiz before pre-learning, minimum learning level, before you start a topic? So there's a questions to be given. After that, followed by what you teach, then the learning outcomes to be measured. Now, these things were happening face to face. Teacher used to ask questions, raise your hand, who knows this answer? Now that has gone off. At the same time, it is giving you an option that you can teach a student sitting thousands of kilometers away from your location. We did a lot of exercises in this area. I mean, this has been a very good learning, because I don't know if some of you know, we have a schools in 8 different countries. And if one teacher is absent, I have set up proxy or a substitution of that teacher from Singapore. A Singapore teacher was teaching a student who was sitting in Abu Dhabi in that same lesson. And that was actually a very good exercise, which used to be normal under normal situation. What used to happen? If the teacher is absent or teacher is stuck up somewhere else, another teacher will go, maybe just occupy a time, and then time is wasted. This time has been utilized, and we have learned that cross-campus proxy setting can happen. If another example, I'll give you a very small example, especially in the board classes, because CBSE board classes, board examinations are approaching, and there are certain subjects, specifically the accountancy has been one pain point across the campuses. There are people, those who really get stuck up with balance sheet and all that. Physics has been another area. So what did we do? We just hired a people for 10 hours. hired an expert person for 10 hours. Can you teach these 3 topics to my student? That's it. And all campus students, they have joined. It was not important whether 100 people around that call or 200. But one teacher could manage and clear their doubt. And after that, when we tested their knowledge, they were good and thorough. The mastery of that topic was achieved. So technology plus the teacher's experience, these two has to actually blend. Blended learning will definitely be a successful as well as the future of education in days to come.
Right. But I mean, what you were describing is also largely still the synchronous model that has just moved online. It's still a teacher student interaction, whether it's a student who's sitting in a different city, it doesn't matter. But it's still a very synchronous system of education. But if you want to move to an asynchronous model, I think a lot of the onus now comes on the student, right? This is probably, I think colleges are more geared to an asynchronous system, at least in the West, rather than in India, where you have a system of credits and you have a certain number of days to submit something online and earn credit. So, if I come to Dr. Soumya Narayan, you think what do you think it's going to take for us to actually shift to a system like that? Because in India, the entire education system is right now still largely by rote, largely a synchronous system, largely a teacher-student interaction, and then once school is over, they're done. You just have homework which they just do and submit the next day. But if we have to move to a full asynchronous system, what do you think it's going to take?
I think really the answer lies in trying to see what is it that we want our students to learn. If the focus is largely on content, then it's really difficult to make this kind of a shift. But if you go into more project-based learning, if you're willing to do more research-oriented work, and this could mean different things in different sections of the school, depending on the age level of students. But the more you get into helping students, learn how to learn, and I think that is where the important focus of our teaching and learning should really be in school, because the content is available. You know how to search, you can find most of the content. But what we need to help children do is to understand that just knowing the content is not enough. How are you going to apply it? How are you going to work in groups to make these presentations? When you do research, how do you do research without plagiarizing? How do you present point of view in such a way that you are articulate, that you can share a perspective? So the focus of education itself and our outcomes that we want from our children has to change a little bit. And only then I think you will go into the true asynchronous model where the students are not so worried about whether I got the right answer, but you are encouraging the child to think and learn. And I think unless we are able to, as a society, as parents, as teachers, invest in making that mind shift, I think then we will not be able to truly leverage the benefit of asynchronous learning, but also the benefit of making children independent. And I think this is where children really struggle when they move from school to college, because in school, everything knowledge is curated and given to you. You're taught to take a test. But when you go to college, you're forced to think. And I think the experience in school should really be about building those skills.
Right, right. In fact, that's something I wanted to take to Sumita also, because I know for a fact that Heritage has a pretty hybrid model right now, where you have synchronous classes between 9 and 1, and then after that they're given assignments and with 3-4 days to research a topic and submit it, and they work in crews. There are 3-4 students working together in a group.
Yeah.
So but again, when it comes back to the board and then the examination time, it goes back to a full synchronous system. So how do you think we can actually take this model? See, with English speaking schools, with the schools in the cities, I think it is still fairly easy to and roll out. But how do you take it to the smaller towns and cities, an asynchronous system? Because there it is still, school means look at a blackboard, copy down whatever is written on the blackboard, and that's it.
So I would like to what Dr. Swaminathan is saying. One is, if we can, make them self-reflective. So what asynchronous learning for students mean is that teachers sits with them, set goals, reflect on how they are learning, make them self-directed, and if school systems can figure out a way to make, asynchronous as a part of their habit of work and learning, right? Then we will be able to move to asynchronous learning quite effectively. Then there are tools like, the learning management system, any LMS, let's say Google Classroom, etc. They provide a lot of, discussion forums. And if teachers provide, thought-provoking questions and, post it and increase, so it's not just about student-teacher interaction, it's about student to student interaction with develop in asynchronous mode. So use of discussion forums and use of tools like Nearpod, etc., which help in self-paced learning has been very effective. In fact, we have seen that asynchronous learning with async learning, we have seen an increase in student voice. We have a lot more data about how students are learning, which child is doing what, how much has the child learned, which was never possible to achieve in a completely synchronous world. So to me, if we use these tools effectively and teach assets with the child and make them self-reflective and self-directed, then we'll be able to make the change to a blended learning format.
Yeah, blended learning. I think that's the key over here. You have to still maintain that teacher-student interaction, and I think that has been one of the biggest challenges now during the pandemic, because for almost a year now, students haven't met their teachers physically. So, how are you tackling this challenge? If I could take it to Ashutosh, at Bloom, among your teachers, the whole interaction, because it's not just about the lessons. There are times when you need to also know about a student's life, what's happening for holistic social learning, and also I guess in terms of like physical education, I think sports classes, art, dance, I think these things have taken a backseat in this whole pandemic. And how do you get asynchronous about that? I don't really see that happening.
Yeah. So two questions. That one is about how teachers are taking the interactions forward, and we have a thing called a mentor teacher who mentors 4 students, and every teacher has their mentees. And the idea is not to talk about education, it's to talk about everything okay, any stress, and they're like friends. They can share their notes with the other subject teachers in case there's a problem. So we find that because we were a CBSE school working in a normal CBSE environment where kids would come by buses and go back, and so time was a constraint, and things like that. But we have found that the interaction now during pandemic is amazing between the kids and the students, with the students and the teachers. I mean, the way it has increased, and more because we've started to do online teaching, of course, not asynchronous, but in batches of 4 and 5, and then have mentor teachers and all that. And so interaction has really, taken a front seat. Also, that I think it's how teachers motivate students to look up content and then leave it. So motivation by teachers is critical, because if it's asynchronous and the kids have to be self-motivated and they have to become self-learners, so that initial pep talk by the teachers, I think is very critical, and a bit of follow-up, like I said, we do. So our asynchronous model has been very successful because of this um, personalized attention, not teaching really at that time, but generally, chatting up with students and saying all is fine, and any problems, may I talk to your other subject teacher, all okay at home, and things like that. Regarding the other co-curricula, we do art, we have dance teachers coming, and sports we've kind of refrained because we are scared to let them play on their own and their own environments, because we don't know, we have safety concerns. So, and this is what the NEP said. NEP said curriculum is not only content; it's also art, and it's sports, it's literature, it's humanity, it's everything. So we are far away, and as Dr. Soumya and Simita have been saying, we need to go a long way to develop methods to really get into asynchronous teaching. It'll take time, but I think we Indians are very quick. Look at this, the way it's happening. I mean, the As for findings, I am so pleased. There are some states that the total number of enrolled kids who have access to smart gadgets is 80 odd percent. I mean, that's amazing. So we have the reach, we got the bandwidth, and I don't see this far. I mean, getting sports on board in a safe environment. So lots going to happen. I think it's good. I'm really looking forward to this academic year. I think it'll be great fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think this academic year now you'll slowly see students coming back to school, and I think that's where the challenge lies now. After having a whole year of asynchronous or slash online learning happening, now suddenly when you're back in a school environment, how do you ensure that this kind of a system continues um, among all the students when they come to school between say 9 to 2 or whatever, and then they go back home? How do you keep asynchronous education going? And I don't think there may be students, like all students would be able to come back to school immediately. It's going to be in phases, right? So how do you see this happening on an international scale? If I was to just toss it to Pramod first from Singapore.
Yeah. So what I see is there are phases of changes which are happening. The first phase was always something like the synchronous model. It has turned into an online kind of a teaching without much change into it. Now, in the second phase, which is now when the campus is opening, when the campuses has an option to attend a synchronous system or get into an asynchronous part, so that option will come now. What we see is up to this time, we have never been talking about, definitely, I mean, on paper, we say child centric learning, but do child has an option to decide that I will study mathematics today? I will not study English? No, it's the school which decides. Can child decide that no, I will come to 10 o'clock to the school and go back at 6 o'clock? No, it's the teacher and the school decides. So we say child centric learning, but end of the day, it is the school centric learning. Asynchronous model gives us that option. If child wants to do 3 lessons of mathematics today, then he can go whether whatever technology or LMS system you are using it, but he can go faster than any other student. Asynchronous model allows you to go to a higher level. If the child is exceptionally doing well in algebra, then he can do a level high in algebra and can move far ahead of his own student group. So that's the benefit of asynchronous model. Now, in the days when campuses will open, there'll be a tug of war between a traditional teachers and traditional method of teaching, and a student will try to pull that, look, the new modern and newer systems are better. So there the management has to take a control which direction they need to put a weight to ensure that the learning happens at fast. But going forward, when you study the history of any pandemics, you see that historically it takes 3 to 4 years to settle. People may be talking about that corona has gone, COVID is subsided, schools are opening, but the situation and impact will remain for another 2 3 years. So when such situations are there, when we have evidences of that, then the organization should start working on child-centric learning and to ensure that after school, whether it's at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, there's sufficient material which is available for child to learn on its own with his own pace. The learning should happen anywhere, anytime, and that will lead to a organization to a next level, to students learning to even further higher level, and child will start enjoying learning. Right now, specifically when we say school is actually a guided learning. Teacher ensures that you know answers of all the questions which are asked in last 10-year board examination so that you score 90%. It's not about his knowledge, it's about that he can write that. And teachers make sure that you know all the answers because the result is important. When you say asynchronous learning, it will turn out the child's knowledge is important. It's not that he has gone through the all modules. So it's a different concept which is going to change in the days to come.
Absolutely. I think we are at a turning point right now
Yes.
in the whole education system. because I think asynchronous learning is something that has been there in, say, postgrad research, graduate level, but never in the school system.
True.
But how are we going to ensure that this kind of a model also translates to marks when it comes to the board exams? Uh, because whatever system of education you follow, whether it's a synchronous or asynchronous model, at the moment you, at the end of the day, it is the ICSE or the CBSE or the AGCSE which dictates what answers you should know to what questions, whether it's a concept or whether it's just an answer or a formula. So, if I just to take this, Dr. Soumya, how do you think we can, on one hand, ensure that there is conceptual learning by experience, etc., but at the end of the day, also falling in line with what the boards are asking you? Or do you think there should be a change in the way the boards now evaluate students?
Um, so for I think with NEP, I expect that there will be some kind of a qualitative change in the way we approach education. We have to wait and watch to see what that kind of change is going to be. But to answer your question, uh, the way we approach it in school is really to say, how can I make this learning experience immersive and exciting for my child? So if I can think about all the asynchronous activities that will feed into my classes, start the classes with probably with anything, a Neopod, Kahoot, quiz, something that will hook them. Talk about deepen the understanding through class discussions, to problems that they solve. Use Padlets to find out where my child is in their learning. These are all things that I can do online. I can also do it when the child is face to face. But at the end of it, you are blending everything. You're allowing the child to immerse themselves in their learning. You're giving them enough practice. You're also making sure that they have the confidence to take whatever exams they are, whether it's ICSE, IB, Cambridge. It doesn't matter. If the learning is robust, if the process is sound, the outcomes will be good. Yeah, the focus should never be only on test taking. The focus should be first on the learning, followed by the kind of discipline that is required for the testing. So it's just it is just a kind of a robust process that you follow to make sure that you keep the learning, the student engagement, to make sure that the child is always involved in this process and reflecting on the learning, so that the outcomes are maximized for the student. Yeah. Roshan,
We're
you're
getting
muted.
questions. Yeah. I know.
Mm.
We're getting some questions coming in from the attendees as well. Of course, they're asking, can we ask some of the comments? Yes, of course. There is one question which is very interesting, which is like, can you throw some light on the values of education? Is it possible to deliver values through an asynchronous model now? Because this is largely something that is dependent on a direct teacher to student kind of
Mhm.
interaction. So, yeah. I mean, I'd probably give this to you again, Dr. Soumya. Can you just touch upon the values of education?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do even in our online school is that we have class assemblies. We have wellness Wednesdays. We have life skill workshops which students are participate in. We understand that learning is not just related to the kind of marks that you get. You want to raise a whole individual. The question is, how do you find the avenues? And the great thing about the online medium is the moment I have a speaker, the moment I have somebody who has anything to share, I can easily pull them into a classroom. I can, like, as somebody else on the call said, you can promote says, you can get 200 people, 300 people. It really doesn't matter. But the thing is that you just have to make those opportunities available for your students. And if you're always, give a little bit of room in the way you manage the timetable, so that you can manipulate it a little bit and not just be so focused on the learning outcomes, but also understand that these outcomes also matter. And especially for a child in this online environment, when you're all alone at home, it's not that you're in class, you're having this conversation with, many children. So how do you reach out to them so that they are not lonely? The mental health and the well-being of the child is extremely
Right.
important. It's a very uncertain time.
That's true. That's true. So, in fact, we've got another question coming in, which says, like, do you think that the online platform will completely disappear once the physical classrooms start again? Sumita, what's your take on this? Do you think online education will continue next year, perhaps?
So, see, my answer to this is, resolutions do not last, but the changes which we adopt during the moments of truth last longer. And we've gone through so much. I think this change is going to be sticky, though we will need effort to not let it revert back to synchronous classroom. But because we've gone through a lot, we've put in effort, we've started realizing the advantages of asynchronous platform and the kind of student voice that we can hear, etc. I think it will bring about a change in education system, and I'm hopeful that it will not go back to the old ways.
Right. But do you think, if I was to ask Mr. Ashutosh, do you think that a completely online system can replace brick and mortar schools in the long run, or do you think for people like you, this would actually be an opportunity to take your school, your brand to a larger
Further,
student community without having the physical space?
This is related to a question which was being addressed earlier. As we open gradually, they'll allow fewer kids to come in. And one of the conditions for eligibility for a child to appear for the board exams is attendance, physical attendance, as of now. I'm sure the Ministry of Education and the CBSE is aware of the situation. And if once they do allow attendance, whether physical or online, as the same thing, and it's counted for eligibility to appear for the exams, I think it will open up situations for every school to reach out and they can obviously, because of infrastructure already being there, and if a certain percentage of parents do opt for the online education and send them once a week, twice a week, or whatever, you can scale. So if that answers your question. And also that the NEP also refers to a technology forum which they will create, which will be an open platform for everybody to give in suggestions and to, because you see, in the 86 and 92 policies, they did not estimate the strength of the internet. And we suffered. So this, in the NEP, they have ensured that we have taken into account the strength of the internet and technology, and so there's a whole chapter at the end of the NEP talking about this. So I'm sure this is online will happen if we have to scale and to handle the problems of the country. And you pointed out earlier, in the rural part of the country, it may be an issue, but I think they will address it. I mean, they are laying broadband everywhere, and I'm sure it's just going to happen.
In fact, that's a question that's just coming from another of our attendees, which I think again you should take, because it says, while I understand the value of blended learning, it works with big private schools, but what do we do about the millions of children who have neither the resources nor the know-how to actually use this model?
Yeah. See, it definitely will take time. It will take education. It will take time. We did a survey, for example, how many kids would require help with technology to get online and to, submit reports and their assessments and so on and so forth. And we hardly had 3 or 4% who needed help. Everybody knew what to do. Teachers probably had a problem, but the kids knew exactly what to do. I think it's a question of time as it reaches out now, as they are laying broadband cables everywhere in every village, and this is what the Prime Minister is doing. I'm sure it's a matter of time. You have to give it time. It just can't happen overnight. But it'll reach the villages. I'm sure. I'm very confident. And vernacular languages are in. They have to be taught in their own language. I think there's so much. The NEP is an amazing document. I mean, fantastic document.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of very good suggestions in there. And especially coming to, you just touched upon the vernacular language. I think sometime back, I was just talking to Sumita as well. You had some, points on how to take this to the grassroots level in vernacular languages. So What do you think we can do to actually get more people involved in this? At the most, I think there is technology involved, so it involves at least a smartphone. But besides that,
So
the
yeah,
language education problem.
yeah. So availability. Are you addressing it to me or?
Yes, to you, Sumit.
So yes, availability of the content in vernacular language is important, and I feel that it's also at some level we need some kind of certification of the content also, because there are a lot of content providers. So there has to be some entity which is certifying the content which is going to the grassroots level and ensuring that the content is good. So these are required apart from obviously infrastructure which is required. And, so
Okay. Another interesting question, which I'll probably ask Dr. Soumya to take. This is from Subrangshu Sahu says, my question to all is, uh, most importantly, nobody is discussing about the health implications of digital education. Although I support online education, it has certain health implications. So how do we tackle that?
Yeah. So I think one of the first things that we did when we were going online is actually try to figure out what is the right screen time for different sections of school. You can't replicate the day of 8 to 2:30 online and do exactly what you did online, because I think that is extremely punishing. And so we came up with different kind of models, breaking it out into synchronous teaching, independent work, feedback time. We really broke the mold, as it were, to make sure that they were, and we have different models for different sections of school, because in senior section kids work independently. They don't have to be online all the time. In primary school, we meet them, let them do independent work, and then meet them again to make sure that the work is done. So we do different things in different sections of the school, but we also spend a lot of time on emotional well-being. We have counselors in school. We and I think more than teachers, counselors have been working extraordinarily hard in this pandemic, because they've been meeting students independently. They've been available, because this is a time in which everything. It's a time of deep uncertainty, and the children who are already vulnerable are more vulnerable because they're alone, because they don't have the support of their peers. They can't feed off on the positive energy of students in the classroom, right? So and another thing that we did is, yes, we actually do have PE in our online school, where the teachers come. They do one day it's football, one day it's basketball. They do a lot of exercises. They work on on their skills, that that you there is no need to not do something because you are alone. But the thing is that to do something meaningfully, that do something that builds the sense of community, that always keep that to know and understand that learning is more than just passing that exam. The learning is, to be whole. And,
Exactly.
we want our children to be whole during this pandemic.
Right. I mean, there's another interesting suggestion, I'll say, coming in from Sudhir Pandey, who says, all children have different intelligence levels, liking and understanding of different subjects. He thinks the book should be also written in three different levels, like tough, medium, and easy, which is something that actually goes with asynchronous learning, doesn't it? I mean, you learn at your pace. You take the exams or the tests at your pace. So while there may be a very brilliant student in the class who's at level 10, there may be others who are level 8 or level 7, right? So do you think this is something that can actually be brought about in India, or is it going to be really a tough change to make going forward? If I was to take this to Pramod.
Yes, that's the way forward. But then it will take some time for, entire Indian community to understand that that's the need of time. What I'll say is, what is taught in the classroom is basically controlled by what questions are asked in the board examination or any final examination. If the question is, when was Gandhiji born, the answer is only 2nd October. There can't be anything else. The child, instead of learning anything, he will just mug up 2nd October. It cannot be 3rd, it cannot be 4th. There can't be second answer. So as a organization, whether it's a CBSE or it's ICSE state boards, they have to rethink about the art of questioning. If you ask what are three philosophies of Gandhiji which you think your life is impacting, answers will be 100 times different than for each individual, and they'll be learning into it. Then he will actually learn the Gandhian philosophy and how Gandhian philosophy is implementing or affecting his life. So in the days to come, we will have changes coming up, not alone just by a directive of NEP, but the implementer level, that is the CBSE, ICSE, Maharashtra board, Uttar Pradesh board, and all that will come. That will change up. Their methodologies will change. Once that change come, obviously at a school level, we will have an option of a child of 10 years can also take a board examination in mathematics, not in all subjects, in just mathematics, the way the Cambridge board works, that a child can take up a higher level examination in one subject. He may not be very that good in English, but he may be at a 10th class or a 12th class level in one subject. That second part will come. The age or the year barrier will not control the child's learning. It's not that the session starts in the month of April and it ends in the month of March. If you have completed, say, 30 hours of learning in English, then you can take the examination after 3 months also, or after 1 month also. So these are certain ideas which definitely are going to come, and it will become a reality the way virtual learning has become reality for all of us. The last point, what I would like to put across to the entire attendees and audiences, in last 1 year, we have not just crossed 365 days. In terms of education learning, we have leaped for at least 6 to 10 years. In normal process without COVID, this kind of virtual learning, online learning, or even these kind of discussion would have been somewhere in 2030, which we are doing it in 2021. So there's a lot of learning which has happened at a school level, at a student level, and this is not going to go back to a year's growth. It is a decade growth.
Right. Yeah. At the same point, there is someone who's also saying that, I'm working in the villages of Rajasthan, where I've seen that there are 43 lakh students who have no internet connection. How do we get this kind of learning system to them? So, I mean, this is not just a technology challenge, because yes, I mean,
Yeah.
internet is now reaching villages, but how do you get the teachers to reach these students? Ashutosh, you want to take that?
So if
Yeah,
I
just
add up one point over here,
Sure.
that this is the way, there are two segments of it. One is that the broadband is not there or a hardware is not there. But we need to understand even the quality teachers are not there in those rural area. So there are two parts of it. One is about the physical facilities, another is about the knowledge and the quality teacher. The broadband, reaching a broadband to an area is a government decision which can happen overnight. But to develop a quality teacher who can actually bring the best out of those students in the rural area is a decade or more than that duration, because that is an experience. Now, here what we are saying is, with asynchronous teacher, the second part, a teacher sitting in Delhi or in Faridabad or in Chennai can teach to the student sitting in the remote village of Rajasthan, if gadget and the broadband is provided.
Right.
Yeah,
Ashutosh,
yeah.
you want to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to actually just go back to the 2 points. One was about different levels of textbooks. After doing this experiment with mathematics, the CBS having 2 levels of mathematics, now they are going to extend this to all subjects. So it is on the anvil. There will be 2 levels in each subject. The child can decide which level he wants to study, the easier one or the regular one. The second was about the help for mental well-being. I think the Ministry of Education has the Manodarpan program, where actually anyone can call upon their helpline number and seek help. So that's a government initiative, and I just wanted to bring it to the audience that if they are not aware of this, they could have a look at that. I think it's there for us, for everybody. And regarding Rajasthan, yes, this is what the Yasser has. Rajasthan has the least amount of, one of the states where the kids don't have smart gadgets. And they also found that there was hardly any contact between the kids and the schools. They also found out that there were no distribution of literature or reading material content to those children by, it could be through post, it could have been through anything, but there was none. So one of the answers is to reach out and to see that they get content at their doorsteps, whether through post office or through schools or through community centers, or they have access to television viewing in the community center, like the way it started in the 60s in the UK as the community college. We could use the neighborhood center to get kids in and to to do it. Takes effort. I mean, all this is, there's no snap answers to all this. It will take time and planning and political will and determination.
But if I was to take a step back, we're not really the asynchronous system is not really very new to us in India. At least at the university level, you have IGNU, which is, I would say, a largely asynchronous system only, where you just come and give your exams and you do most of your study material on your own. So how difficult is it going to be to actually implement the system, at least for the high school level, from maybe class 8 onwards to 12?
We have the NIOS for schools.
Okay, yeah, but now with the whole online blend as well, yes, with the online education.
Yeah, so it's asynchronous. You study, you have a weekend class if you want to attend, and you appear for your boards. You do whatever. It's asynchronous, absolutely.
Okay.
So they are, yeah. So and you also have the other private, for private candidates. They have the CBSE has an exam, so it's there. It's just that they haven't been recognized and they've been looked down upon as a board. But for universities, they will not distinguish. If you have a degree from the NIOS, it's as good as any state government, any board degree of any state or whatever. So once that gets into acceptance in this country, I see this really growing a lot.
Okay. One more question which I had was in terms of practicals. Now, when it comes to doing practicals, this is something that doesn't really work neither in an asynchronous form or even in an online form. There's got to be a kind of a physical thing for at least the practical exams. That's what someone's asking. How do you tackle something?
Well, there's the O labs, but I'm sorry if I'm answering out of turn.
Yeah, no, go.
There is a provision. Sorry, but there is this O labs. Our kids have been using O labs. It's there in it's a CBSE website. You can do experiments virtually. You can do it asynchronously. You don't have to have anyone there. Even if you make mistakes, there's no danger. Go ahead and play with your chemicals and whatever. So it's there, and I'm sure lots of other things will come up, because once online and asynchronous things is successful, there'll be a lot of startups creating lovely virtual experiments for it's there, it's on the anvil, coming anytime shortly on your screens.
Right. Yeah. In fact, another person, Sudhir Pandey, says many people do not have a study atmosphere at home, where parents are not in sync with how a child is attending school, and they often want such children to attend school during the school time and not be at home. So how do we tackle something like that in a system where the student is trying to learn at home, but the atmosphere is not really conducive?
So if I could answer that, one of the things that we did in the beginning of the school year is actually send out a note to parents, to say that what is it that you should keep ready for your child to be a learner at home. Specify the kind of work atmosphere. Can the child be in a quiet place? Can the TV be off? Because in some places you have the TV that works all the time and the child is also learning. How can you support the child at home? How can you be a kind of a partner with your child? Because we have two types of parents, right? We have parents who want to do the work for your child, and you have the parents who are just not there at all. And to manage both. So I think the communication to the parent body is very important for you to be able to have more predictable outcomes for your students.
And in terms of our current examination process, how do you think that should now change? I think Pramod had already answered a bit of it, but the entire exam process, how do you think it needs to change to be conducive to an asynchronous system of learning and also an online system? Because there are some software which, where you keep your camera on and then you're writing in a piece of paper, then you scan the paper and then you upload it again. So there's a lot of processes that happen over here, which is taxing on a child who's anyway quite uh, very under pressure with the whole exam system. So how do you think the exams need to change to like,
I
can I take this?
actually hope,
Yeah,
if I can
you
answer
can take
that.
it,
And
please.
yeah, so I think with the NEP, I hope that we will have what we will really change is the type of questions we ask students.
Okay.
If the questions are most fact based, then the meaning of that assessment is very superficial. But if we actually ask more open ended questions, we ask them to apply their knowledge in different contexts. Then you really, it doesn't matter whether you're online or you're right in front of a examiner, because then you're really focusing on the thinking and not the prosaic answers.
Right.
So I think that is and with that, then all this proctoring and all these things won't really matter.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, to add on to Dr. Swaminarayan, so assessment should happen every day. So with the use of learning management system, it's so easy to get data on everyday assessment, consolidate where how the student is progressing, and where the student is at right now. So it's amazing. So the use of tool and a mindset shift that everyday assessment is what is required to change, is the assessment model change that we need. So
Right. Yeah.
May I
So,
also say something on
yeah,
that?
sure. We have about 3 minutes left. So yes, go ahead.
So one is that question papers are normally recall, application, understanding. So you divide a question paper, and what we did was that there was a viva after the exam, so no cameras, nothing. But when your teacher speaks to a child and say, "Okay, how did you answer this question?" she gets to know whether she or he has studied or not. So that was one way we could verify things. Number two, as Dr. Soumya said, yes, the CBSE is looking at cutting down rote questions and bringing in more of these high order questions and application understanding questions. And by 2025, they are sure that they will be totally a different pattern. Every year, 10% they will increase these kind of questions and cut down rote questions. So Dr. Soumya has really hit the nail on the head, and it is going to happen. And we are all very, very looking forward to such a change, and which will benefit asynchronous, where understanding is assessed rather than rote.
Right. Right. No, so I think this has been a very interesting, session. We've got so many new ideas here, and I'm hoping that the government also takes note of this. With the new education policy, they have already started rolling out some of what we've discussed over here. But I guess the whole pandemic also has been an eye opener to force us into a system where we've had to keep education going and yet also make sure that it continues in an asynchronous form when the teacher is not available, all the time to actually see what the students are doing. But I think this has been a very interesting session. Thank you all for your inputs. Thank you, Dr. Swaminarayan. Pramod, thank you for joining us all the way from Singapore. Of course, that's the benefit of a system like this. It's all online. You can be anywhere in the world. Thank you, Ashutosh, for joining us. And Sumita, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting session. And I'll now hand it back to Vidit for the rest of the summit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to all the speakers. Thanks a lot. Thank you. All right. So it's now time for the last session of the day called Content and the Game of Accessibility. The session touches on the importance of content to be accessible to all and explore the obstacles in achieving this today. For this, please welcome Mr. Mayank Kumar, co-founder and MD of Upgrad, Raghav Gupta, Managing Director, India and APAC Coursera, Satya Raghavan, Director, Content Partnerships, YouTube India, Rajneesh Kumar, Director, Digital Education, Department of School Education and Literacy, Minister of Education, Diksha POV. The session will be moderated by Shruti Dhapola, Assistant Editor, Indian Express Online. Over to you, Shruti.
Hello. Hi. Is everyone online? I see Rajneesh. I
Yes,
don't.
yes. Yes, good afternoon. I'm here.
Yeah. Mayank, I'm not
I'm
seeing.
not able to switch on my camera. I think it requires, it says the host has stopped it.
Okay. If the host could just. I think they're just because we were supposed to start at 12:20, so it's still 12:19, so maybe they're still waiting to do that. So, is everyone on the panel? Satyan, I don't see.
Hi, Shruti. This is Raghav from Coursera. I don't know if you can see me.
Yeah, Raghav, I can see you, but I can see you, Raghav. So let's start. Let's start with the questions. The first question is for. This is the way the panel will go. I have an opening question for each of the panelists, and we're going to. Everyone gets around 2 to 3 minutes to make their point, and we'll take the discussion forward as it unravels. Does that work for everyone? Yeah. So let's start with the first question is for Rajneesh Kumar. Can you know what are the challenges in reaching out to a wider audience, especially when it comes to education online, and how has Diksha in particular performed during the pandemic situation? Because we've had a very unique year, 2020, and we expect online education to continue for most of the year. So, what would be the right model in your view, especially given there is a greater need in rural areas for online education during the pandemic, and this need for online education might well continue?
Well, thank you for asking this question. We're actually very proud and also very relieved that we could continue with education in this difficult situation. In the month of April, when all this actually started, we were all quite taken aback, and we were not sure whether the country will be able to come up to that level, even our infrastructure. But luckily, Diksha, which was envisaged as the One Nation, One Digital platform and announced under PM eVidya, one of the Atmanirbhar programs. So what we've done basically is all the 30, 35, 36 states and UTs have onboarded to Diksha. They have their content there in the local language. So Diksha has about 31 Indian languages onboarded. And since lockdown, say March 24th or so, it has had about 19 billion page hits, which is close to 1900 crore page hits. It does not actually mean that 1900 crore children used it, but that's the number of hits that we had, and about 2.8 billion learning sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge with Diksha, as we grow, is that how to have engaging content. Teachers started with just replicating their offline classes into online classes. Now that's it was the first thing to do, but we realized that that's not the way to teach in an online environment.
Yeah.
6-7 months of experience has shown us that the first thing is the teacher aligns himself or herself to the methods of teaching, and also the content must be engaging. It should generate interest in children. It should be more of a self-learning environment in which the teacher facilitates the learning, and there are some doubts that children can ask. But of course, it will take some more time to evolve. Then we saw great potential in teacher learning and teacher training. So there's a program called Nishtha, which is a national initiative for holistic advancement to teachers. So about 4.2 million teachers are envisaged to be trained. 23 lakh teachers have registered. About 39 million enrollments have happened across the courses, and about 34 million completions have also taken place, which means about 3.4 crore certificates have been issued to close to 23 lakh teachers, because the Nishtha has about 18 modules. So the challenge is how to have unique content and how to reach out to every nook and corner of the country through the device and the internet. So we try to use TV radio, but TV radio, as you will all realize, is a passive medium. It has no way to, it does not have a two-way communication. So that way it has a disadvantage. But in general, we've been able to reach most of the children. And though where we could not reach, the teachers physically delivered the textbooks and the course material. But we are very happy and relieved that we could scale through the pandemic because of the Diksha infrastructure. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insights on Diksha. We'll take it next with Satya. We wanted to know, YouTube is not a traditional learning platform, but it has, at least not envisioned as a traditional learning platform, but that's what it has ended up becoming for a lot of people in India. And so, how does YouTube filter all the online learning content which is, become available? Have you seen a rise in such content being uploaded, especially in the 2020 pandemic? And how do you make sure that the best content comes up on top on the search results? Because I know that there are a lot of people who are searching for, how to look, become an IAS on YouTube. And I know there are people who read newspapers out on YouTube to help with IAS preparation. So that's completely different kind of content. So what have you seen in 2020, and how are you making sure that this content is shown to the viewers who are searching?
Yeah, no, thanks, Shruti, for that question, and thank you to the Indian Express Group for having me here as a part of this panel. You're right. Traditionally, YouTube was always visualized, as a platform that's like the entertainment platform, right? And that was pretty much the case till about 2015 or so. In around 2015, we suddenly saw information or infotainment emerge as a huge use case. But in the last 2 years, right, is when we have actually seen learning really emerge as a fundamental pillar to YouTube, right? So earlier, if anyone would come on, for catching up on music or movies, or 2015 onwards, if people came on to find out, how do I cook a particular recipe, or how do I apply makeup, or things like that, which is more in the information space. But now, for the last 2 years, we're seeing people come onto the platform to solve specific learning needs, right? And even that is, amazingly diverse in a sense, right? So there's the classic K-12, right, which is more the academic part of learning, where you have kids who go to school who might want to use YouTube as a way to supplement what they have learned in school. We're also seeing schools actively, give links out to their students saying, hey, we covered thermodynamics in school today, but here's an amazing lecture by a professor of thermodynamics, maybe in some international or Indian university. So there's that use case. There's also the use case of people who want to move up in their station in life by writing a competitive exam. Perhaps it's GMAT or IIT or the UPSC. You find people who come onto YouTube, and there are specific channels which help people do that, right? And it's not just the case that it's in English, right? As YouTube spreads out, as more and more people get connected to the internet, we're also seeing people do the same in multiple languages. So languages like Tamil or even Punjabi, there are channels which are actually doing all of that, which is K-12, higher learning, and even enrichment to a level, right? Which is how do I improve my English speaking skills, or how do I learn yoga, or how do I learn dancing. The pandemic was really fantastic in the sense that it allowed us to go back to our core ethos, which is that of being helpful. We really saw that a lot of people, teachers, from small schools, who said, okay, I'm not able to reach my students, so let me put myself on a channel on YouTube, and then share that link with them. We saw teachers do that. We saw schools do that. We even saw education boards do that, right? State boards, national boards. And what we did is, share insights with people like that on how best to use the platform. So it allowed us to do what we really fundamentally believe that is our ethos, which is how do we be really helpful. And in a lot of ways, I think that also I think YouTube then ends up being edtech for everyone, where you can use YouTube, and it's like spread out to a vast section of the populace. So that's really something that we really embraced during the pandemic, and we continue to do so.
Thanks, Satyan. I'll address the next question to Mayank. Um, so we wanted to understand, like, how can platforms such as Upgrad keep content free for users, keep some of the keep more content freely available to users, because a lot of the content is also behind paywalls as well, and of course companies have to strike that balance between the paid and the free content. And what are the best models you think to make online learning in such a way that it's accessible to a lot more people, not just those who can afford to pay for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, Shruti. There's so much content available. Then why do we need platforms where you will end up paying and taking up a program? So I break it down, and again, I mean, if one reads history of how education has evolved, there's a lot to learn from there. I think we had multiple events in the history which said education will transform. The first one was when radio came in. Everyone said now education will just change drastically. Television came in. People said education will change drastically. Internet came in. Education will change drastically. But I guess what has happened in that period over that course of time is that the key problem that we have been always trying to solve for is the problem of access to content. And in my mind, just again from what limited that I've seen in the ecosystem, is that the access to content problem to a very large extent has been solved by libraries. Every city has great libraries. Now, small towns don't have libraries. So I think phase one of online education, to what Rajnish sir said and Satya said, is that a lot of content is now getting accessible on your own device at different points in time. But what we fail to sometimes appreciate and not spend too much time is that education is a lot to do it has a lot to do with discipline and bringing in the rigor, and access to content is making content accessible, so you can get great content accessible across various best of the faculty members, best of the teacher. But you and I know, Shruti, that unfortunately we don't go and binge watch Python 101 or digital marketing 101, but we will definitely binge watch Scam 1992, and we'll definitely binge watch the new Game of Thrones episode. So education inherently requires a strong amount of cognitive load, and that cognitive load is where, without the human intervention, it becomes very difficult for one to put the cognitive load into the individual. So it's very difficult for people to say, okay, now I will spend 6 hours learning geometry 101. And I'll give you a very simple example. I mean, when I was doing my 10th, 12th board, my mother would wake up for my physics examination and give me a glass of milk at 5 a.m. She did not need to do that. She doesn't know, she's not a subject matter expert in physics, but she only used to wake up so that I have no option but to stay awake. Because now if she has woken up, I cannot fall asleep in front of her. So she did a lot of social sort of contracts with me, unsaid contract that, look, I'm waking up, Mayank, you should wake up also. So in the context, we are coming to your question, Shruti, that knowing that education is about rigor, it is about discipline, and content access is one part of that. What technology platforms such as Upgrad is currently doing is trying to leverage technology to bring in a lot of human touch. How do I bring teaching associates into the system? How do I bring graders into the system? I have a pool of about 1,000 plus coaches. Every day I receive 5 messages about success and career journey, and all of them are thanking the coach, saying, okay, now look, a day before that he helped me in solving for that. As we bring in a lot of human touch, great content will create great education. And I think the combination of amazing content, and India has got fascinating number of teachers. I mean, some best teachers available all across nook and corners of the country. If I can make that one-on-one connect, 5-on-1 connect, 1-on-7 connect, I think a lot can happen, and they can act as what my mother used to do, slap me and make sure that I'm studying. I hope internet has that access where they can put a hand out and slap someone saying, now study. And without that, I think a human touch is what a lot of technology platforms such as ours are using to ensure that we can focus towards outcomes. Last one that I mentioned, Shruti, I think in the journey of making content access, which was the phase one of online education, a lot shifted towards completion and consumption of content. I think we are right now in phase three of online education, where everyone is going to talk about outcomes. If you did this, did your marks increase? If you did this, did you get a job? If you did this, did you find a better career outcome? So I think all those things we are seeing right now, and this is great time to be in the edtech ecosystem where you can leverage technology to solve for the outcome problem.
Thanks, Mayank. Now over to Raghav. Raghav, I want to understand again from you, like, what are the solutions and models that edtech platforms can take in order to ensure the students and those who are looking, to upgrade their skills, how can they get access to the best content? And, again, what models can companies adopt to ensure that more and more people get access to the content? Because we know that, at least in India, not everyone has that same level of paying capabilities as, say, someone, who's living in a metro might compared to someone say in a rural area, and they might still want to upgrade their skills. And now online is getting more and more important. We do know that. So if you can give your thoughts on that.
Sure. And thanks, Shruti, and hi, everyone. So, firstly, I want to say a quick disclaimer. I'm up in the hills. I'm not sure how stable the internet is going to be. So, if it breaks off, please just move on to the next person. But I'll try and quickly share some of my thoughts as well. So, I'm going to limit what I'm saying to higher education. Coursera focuses on the higher education space. I don't have really a point of view as a professional on schooling. And as we talk about higher education, I think it's helpful to talk a little bit about what's changing because of COVID in the industry as well. Because as we prepare students for jobs and careers and life, I think that's what they're going to go into. So we've seen, and as Coursera, we work with thousands of companies and we see millions of working professionals on our platform. And we've seen over the last year that, significant amount of change is happening in industry. World Economic Forum calls it the double disruption. Automation was already happening. COVID-19 has come in. And so one, jobs are getting displaced, jobs are getting lost. Second, companies are saying that the kind of skills that working professionals like all of us need in the future will be significantly different. Third, even after COVID, many of us will continue to work from home, 3-4 days a week. I'm 2.5 hours above Nainital right now, joining an event. So some of this will continue even later. And almost every organization is saying that they will become more digital, whether they're a bank or a manufacturing company. They're saying that they will become more digital. And we've always said that, higher education needs to think about what the industry needs. But I don't think we've seen this level of scale change happening in terms of what the industry needs going forward. And so my sense is that for higher education, there are possibly 5 challenges maybe 4 challenges, one opportunity that COVID has thrown up. Student employability for skills of the future is the first one of them. Second, cost management is a big issue right now. You speak to any university president, any university chancellor, and they're worried about costs because either tuition fees are not coming in or hostel fees have dried up and so on and so forth. Thirdly, faculty development is a big challenge as well, because if you need to get students ready for skills of the future, how do you get faculty ready as well? Because faculty is going to teach them. And fourth, I think both students and parents are pausing and saying, do I want to go to a university that will teach me the usual old stuff? Or is this an innovative university that will teach me the skills of the future? And lastly, I think it's throwing up an opportunity as well to really change the pace at which higher education has traditionally changed in the past. So, curriculum changes, faculty development, even maybe serving more students than the physical capacity of the university allows. So if you are a university that today has 10,000 students, tomorrow you could actually be serving 15,000 students because online allows you to expand capacity without necessarily changing physical ability. Now, given some of that context, right, industry is changing, their challenges in higher education. About 1.5 years ago, Coursera had launched a platform called Coursera for Campus. It's designed for a college or a university to bring high quality learning to their students. And in March last year, when COVID hit, we made this platform available for free to colleges, universities in the country as well as around the world. And we saw lakhs of students take this up and thousands of universities take up this platform. The free program ran till November last year. And it taught us many things. And if I were to highlight 3 things that I took away from this experience, firstly, at the end of the day, high quality content matters, right? If you want to go and learn something very simple, fundamental, that is it high quality content, that matters, right? And if we can bring that as Coursera to students and really make the learning experience enjoyable, as opposed to, you just need to do it because somebody is pushing you to do it, I think it matters, because all these lakhs of students who took learning on Coursera did it because nobody forced them to do it. Second, we found that credential matters as well. So if you're learning Python from a meaningful institution, right? If you're learning Python from IIT Roorkee, it really matters, as opposed to just learning Python from somebody who you don't know, because it's a signal for quality. All of us have aspired to go to top colleges, top universities in our own experience. And so that matters as well. And then third, as opposed to learning online being a standalone experience where you go somewhere and you learn, that learning becoming a part of the fabric of the institution, of the college or the university matters a lot, right? So if as a student at Manipal University, I go onto an online platform and it looks and feels like Manipal, that matters a lot. It could be coming on Coursera or a different platform. And what we've seen this has enabled is high quality learning from an institution that matters, where it becomes a part of the fabric of the institution that I'm a student for, creates a strong pull based system as opposed to a push based system. Nobody should be forcing you to study, right? When I went for my MBA, I know I used to put in 15 hours a day for 1 year because I really enjoyed the learning experience. I should not be doing just because somebody is pushing it. And I think that's been some of our learning over the last 1 year of COVID.
Okay, that's a very interesting point, that nobody should be, forced to do it, but they should want to do it. But I think one point that Rajneesh Kumar sir made, that we need to creating content which is engaging, and because learning online suddenly is very different, and I think even teaching online is a very different experience than say teaching in a physical classroom for a lot of teachers. I mean, there's definitely the screen fatigue which is there. So what are the challenges, in creating this content which is engaging, be it for students or be it for higher education? Uh, if we could get to hear it from, from a point of view how Diksha has done it, that would be great. Or if anyone else wants to take up.
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Or rather, not answer. I would rather ask Mr. Raghav, Mr. Mayank, and Mr. Satya Raghavan that what has been your experience in YouTube? You see, the good point about YouTube is that anybody can create content and it reaches out to people and people choose it by themselves. But the only issue with YouTube is whether that content is actually correct as per the syllabus, or there is no curation directly by YouTube, and it's not possible. So what Diksha wants to do is that we want to put curated content.
Mm.
I think Mr. Mayank from Upgrad and Mr. Raghav from Coursera, they have the highest level of curation possible on the platforms. So what we are now trying to do is that we will engage with CSRs, philanthropic organizations, to reach out and get good content. A lot of people just want to share their content, and our team will curate the content and give it out to the children. That is one way of getting high quality content. The second stage is using technology. For example, AR, VR, mixed reality. Although there are some issues with AR, VR, it's very high bandwidth. So how does it reach out to rural children with the divide increase? But the point is that let us assume in 5 years from now, the whole country is 4G, or maybe we reach out to 5G. We have to plan for that scenario, because really speaking, it's 25 years out of college now, and it's in a flash. So these 5, 6 years, 10 years will also go up in a flash. If we start working now, we can create a very good content, and then the schools of future and the future of schools depends so much on the jobs of the future. Now, I think creativity and critical thinking are going to be the mainstays of education. Knowledge is available at the click of a button from YouTube and Google. Google has done wonders in that. Knowledge is there. How do you induce creativity and critical thinking in children? And since information is now available at such short notice and uncurated, it's got mind-boggling, especially for the child. If I got one newspaper a day, I would read it thoroughly. If I get 15 newspapers a day, I don't know how to choose a newspaper. Same thing, Netflix, Prime Video, all our channels, we all end up fighting in the family to watch a movie. Whereas 20 years before, it was DT National alone, and we were all so happy. Same thing is going to happen with content. So there we require extremely good level of curation, and that is the biggest challenge. So much of content, how to curate that content and how to get the best. So that's where, I don't know how Mr. Mayank and Mr. Raghav do that. Hats off to them and their company. They are really doing a wonderful job in getting the highest level of content to everyone across the world. And Mr. Raghavan, of course, YouTube has done wonders. It has saved so many children because YouTube is also very low bandwidth and available to all and very popular. So I would rather ask all of you, how can you help us?
Yeah. No, and Rajneesh, you put it very well. The way I see it and the way YouTube sees it is that, look, and I want to tie this back to something that Mayank said a bit earlier, right? Which is we are probably in a different phase at this point of time, where outcomes and impact are actually so important, right? Every year that passes by, someone gets left behind, and how can we all kind of come together to make sure that that doesn't happen is very important, right? And as far as YouTube is concerned, you're right, it's an open platform. Anybody can come in and set up a channel and put up learning content. Over time, what happens is content that's the most engaging, that's the one that starts getting surfaced a lot better, right? And to us, that is actually your the digital equivalent of your favorite teacher in school, right? We all have had that, right? And we all must have, I mean, I pray not, but must have also had a teacher who maybe didn't work for one kind of student, right? But what we have seen is a lot of the creators who put up content on YouTube, whether they are an individual or a teacher or a school or a partner like all of us here, actually are in it because of the passion that they have to make some change, right? They're not there because they are paid so much per hour or whatever, right? They are in there because they actually want to make a difference, and that I feel actually sets them apart from the rest, because it allows them to connect with that student in a much more engaging manner. So in addition to all that you talked about, saying how do we make sure that it's curriculum, it's tied to the curriculum, it has the right outcome, it has the right interactivity, it has the right kind of graphics and things like that. Engagement then becomes that other critical factor, right? If you have all of this, and if you have people who are very engaging, who students can connect with, right? And then it doesn't become a chore, right? As again Mayank and then Raga also said, you don't want to tell someone that, hey, get up and watch a video. But when someone goes and seeks it out, right, because they like that particular creator, that is your analogy for the real world good teacher, in that sense, that we all love to sit for hours on end, right? We all have had those kind of teachers. So I think, yeah, it's everyone has a part to play. How can we all collaborate, help each other, is I think the real thing, because our cause is far higher, right? It's that one student. Think about the student in a small town who's probably middle of the class or at the back of the class. How can we also help him or her? It's really something that all of us should think a lot about, because the people who probably come from well-off families have the natural inclination, they're doing well in school. That's great, and they will shine come what may. But how do we also ensure that a whole lot of other people can benefit in that same swath of activities that we're all doing is really something that I would love for all of us to engage more on.
Add one point there, Shruti, to what everyone said. I think the individual who teaches is very, very important. The person who comes on the screen who teaches is for us. While the process is important, sometimes the individual can win over process. And I just mentioned because Anisha said this point about teachers. So when we bring traditional teachers into teaching online, and Satya would have also seen this, that they are great theater artists. They can perform in front of 30 children sitting in front of them, and if they say something, they seek reactions. They look for the faces. Arey, did you understand? Tumko samajh mein aaya? And then they react. But when they move towards digital medium, not the live but the recorded digital medium, they become movie stars. Now I can't visualize the reaction. If I've cracked a joke, is he or she laughing or not? And that transition about when we offered our live platform to a lot of our faculty members, 70-80% plus of them were teaching first time in an online medium. How to teach, the pedagogy of that, how do you become Shah Rukh Khan and not a theater artist, was a challenge for them to transition. Now once that the process, the pedagogy, the approach, what question, and there's a lot to learn from traditional entertainment medium also. I mean, you always have this concept of cliffhanger. I mean, in any Saas Bahut serial, you will last scene, you will go at phone will ring, tring, tring, you will pick up the phone, hello, hello, and then screen will freeze and say, "Aaiye, agli baar dekhiye kya hota hai." That would bring you back to the class. A great professor always brings you back to the next lecture saying, "I'm leaving you with a cliffhanger." Those concepts are skills that individuals have. And if you train them enough, faculty members at Diksha or pan India, how to teach, how to learn, pick up the best skills, leverage that, create a standard template. I think a lot can be achieved with bringing best teachers in that pedagogy format, doing wonders at the end of the day.
I can add a few points, and I think a lot of good points have already been shared. And I would echo what Mayank said, right? I think teaching, so it first starts with appreciation of the fact that teaching online is going to be different from teaching in a classroom. And what we did, Rajneesh, is last year, we looked at a lot of our own learnings and we put out a report which is available in the public domain. It's called The Drivers of Quality in Online Learning. And I'll try and find the link and ping it to you as well. So we looked at thousands of people who teach on the Coursera platform and millions of students who learn on the Coursera platform to said what are the 5 best things that a good teacher does and what are the 5 best things that a good student does as well, because it's a different learning experience online than being in a class. And I'm looking at the report now, and one of the items we said was chunk video content appropriately. Like you would say that if you keep a video, and I'm talking about async learning, not probably live, which Mayank spoke about. So in an asynchronous course, you would want the course duration or the video duration to be under 10 minutes. And we know that if you do that, then completion rates of a course goes up by about 20% because 10 minutes or lesser is the engagement duration of human beings online in a course as opposed to a 60-minute lecture that one would take in a class. And similarly, one of the other elements that we said was provide frequent opportunities to practice. So instead of just a one-way communication where you're teaching, also build in projects, also build in opportunities to practice into the teaching and so on and so forth. So I won't get into the long details here, but they're very actionable insights which are based on research, which is what the best online teachers do. And some of these are people who've taught millions of students, worldwide. So, how do you become Shah Rukh Khan and be able to reach out to millions of people? I think there's some of that insight which is available.
That's a very interesting point. I think that all of you have made that people who are teaching online also need to be very engaging. And I think the struggle also for a lot of teachers is not just about having good content. You could have the best school books, you could have the most engaging books or the most engaging courses. But I think if the people teaching them aren't engaging enough, then I think it'll just kind of fall flat. You could, like Mr. Rajneesh spoke about, the need to curate perhaps content which is high quality. That's important too. But I think the way it's the pedagogy is, kind of the methods that are used, those will matter, of course. And so I'm going to take some questions from the audience. So the first question is that do you think that online platforms will disappear once the physical classrooms start with full effect? And they want to know what is the future of online learning. Also, many of the students and parents say that they are fed up with online teaching. So I think maybe this is a recourse that you might have heard quite a lot. But if somebody wants to answer that whoever wants to take that up, I leave that up to the panelists.
Sure, I can share a quick point of view on that. So I think what we've seen, and I say this again for higher education, what we've seen in the last 3-4 years, right, is the fundamental concept has changed. So when I went to engineering, I learned from my faculty and from visiting faculty, but I did not learn from a third institution, which was somewhere in the world. We saw regulation change about 3-4 years in India, where AICT, UGC, and other regulators said that 20% and now 40% of what you learn as a student in a degree program can come from elsewhere, can come from a third-party university. Basis a lot of the work that we've been doing with universities, at least my expectation is that once COVID goes away, campus is open, maybe 70-80% of education will go back to campus, which I think it should. I have a son in first year of college and I know how frustrated he is not being on campus. But my sense is that 20-30% might permanently stay online. These might be, certain emerging skills. These might be certain specialized topics and so on. But I think we might see a 70-30, 60-40 kind of a balance in the future post-COVID.
Okay. Anyone else wants to add to that?
May I?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, you see, the fact about that people are fed up of digital education, we realized this even before they were fed up. So in the month of June, July, we had issued guidelines to students and teachers and schools that they should not have synchronous classes more than two hours a day up to class 8 and more than 4 hours for class 9 to 12. Because synchronous learning is very tiring. But asynchronous, you can lie down, maybe you can use your own posture. And in the same guideline, Pragyata guidelines, given, how to sit and see a mobile phone or a tablet. So one thing we realized in 6-7 months is that our teaching, जैसे स्कूल में कहते हैं ना कि बच्चे सीधे बैठो, बात मत करो. So in our videos, we need that kind of tinkering. Are you sitting straight? Are you leaning over the mobile? Because actually it has a direct bearing on the productivity of the class. If you are sleepy, if you are things, there's a saying that in today's busy world, a sleepy girl is finding hard to get up because everybody is getting sleepy. But my assurance to everyone in the audience is that this is the future, but does not mean it will replace teachers. Teachers will remain there. The only thing is these are add-ons, these are enhancements to your learning. Calculus, which you cannot understand in the class by the teacher, you can understand on the online video. Go back to the teacher and ask for the doubt. So online learning is there to stay. It's the future, but it will never replace the teacher. And we have to do something about physical and mental health of the children while learning. That we have to find very creative ways to engage. कि बेटा सीधे बैठ जाओ, मोबाइल को अपने आंख के सामने रखो, 25 सेंटीमीटर दूर रखो, 18 इंच का गैप रखो, कुर्सी सीधी होनी चाहिए. All these things have to be part of the culture for online learning, because fatigue is a very big issue for everybody involved in online learning.
I think fatigue and keeping our back straight is a problem for all of us, not just those who are engaged in, maybe students for whom online learning might be a new thing, but I think it applies to even adults. One more question is, how can teachers be trained to make their classes more engaging? Since this seems to be, and this is an issue that seems to have been raised by Mayank. If you want to answer that, since you spoke about the human touch.
Yeah, I think internally at Upgrad, when anyone comes and joins, we do take them through a rigorous 2-month-long training, how to build content. But I've seen enough some very good content available on multiple platforms, which talks about just teaching online. And I think that's something that anyone who's moving towards online teaching, we do send them some video modules on from various platforms saying, okay, let's go through this. At Upgrad internally, we have created a standard template that, look, we'll follow Bloom's taxonomy, we'll follow Kirkpatrick model. There are various pedagogical tools that are available, and those standard tools, but out there in the market, there are enough Shruti content available where you can pick up 2-month, 3-month-long module. But if that one perhaps small recommendation that I may have to Rajni sir is that as part of the B.Ed curriculum also, and as part of the master's curriculum in NET and SET, when people end up becoming teachers, if we can add modules around online education and teaching online, I think, as you said, that it's. I agree that there's no black or white. It's not going to be purely offline, nor is going to be purely online. And if online has to take it up, I think as a systematic level, at a country, we need to have 1 or 2 modules, 1 or 2 credits in our B.Ed curriculum or M.Ed curriculum, where we can teach future generation of teachers to teach online at the end of the day. And look, I mean, every law has got continuous learning credits. Doctors have got continuous credit. I think teachers and implement it back either as mentors or as coaches in the future.
To Mr. Mayank's point, just for the clarification of the people, in the Nishtha module, as I told you before, there is one module on ICT integration for teachers.
Yeah, I've seen
that.
Have
covered that part,
yes,
and we'll improve it based on experience.
Yeah, I mean, I just have one point to add out there, right? One of the things that we've seen work very well on YouTube is a lot of the creators, learning creators, they end up making the content very relatable. And it's never a one size fits all in that sense, right? Typically in school, you are constrained because you are, speaking to, a set of students that you know intimately well, and you never have the time to be able to customize it enough. But I think digital then, allows you to do that, right? Where you can actually make it a lot more relatable, explaining, again, thermodynamics to a person who comes from a certain background versus explaining thermodynamics who comes from a certain level of aptitude can be very different, right? And if teachers can figure that out, that, relatability is the key to content, right? At the end of the day, if it is relatable, it makes sense to you and me, then we'll always remember that, right? So that's just one thing that we've learned a lot that I'd love to share.
Raghav, do you want to add something to that?
Not too much, Shruti. I spoke about the drivers of quality, which is probably a good resource for teachers to refer to. So yeah, I don't think I'll add to that more.
Okay. So one question is around, people who are doing online education in areas. I'm paraphrasing the question a bit, in areas where the network connectivity is not great. It's poor available. Someone saying that the present practice of education seems to have failed children, and how does one move on from there? What are the tools that can be given to them? Because in these cases, content and just having the tech solutions perhaps is not enough because they don't have the connectivity. And this doesn't just apply to students who are, say, in school, but maybe who are looking to upgrade, their skills and might want to try a platform like Coursera. But how can we help out those who are in the remoter areas where not all facilities are available, and they might not always have not just access to great networks, but also access to information that, say, students in a better city would have.
Yeah, I can take that to get us started. So if I double click on the question a little bit, right, and if you think about what levels of connectivity are required, and of course connectivity is an important point. You need best connectivity and most stable internet in a live class. If it's a Zoom synchronous class, that's where you need best connectivity. And it's definitely a challenge, right? I'm worried that my internet will drop any moment, and I'm in the hills as well right now. So I don't know if we have a solution there just yet. I think the next level of connectivity, which is lesser, which is needed, is if it's an asynchronous class, and especially if you can actually download the class onto your device when you have good connectivity. So overnight, you download the class, like you would on Netflix, and you watch it seamlessly. I think that's a second level where it's a lot easier, and I think that's already helping. And this is available on YouTube. This is available on Coursera. I'm not aware if it's available on Upgrad. And what we've also been doing is we've been working with platforms like Zoom, and we've been saying that as a teacher teaches online live, can we take that class and come and make it live on the Coursera platform? And then if a student didn't have good connectivity to watch that class live, at least he or she can later come and take that class asynchronously by downloading the class onto their device. And that reduces the kind of challenges that connectivity has. It, of course, is not a permanent fix, right? So the government's been talking a lot about how learning should be available via the TV, and AICT, UGC have channels where learning is available via TV network, where connectivity goes away, which is probably the solution that we need as well. And maybe some of our platforms need to be available via those channels as well. But I think instead of just a broad overarching statement that network is a problem in remote areas, I agree fully that it's a problem when it's live synchronous training. But I think some of what I shared helps to reduce some of the challenges that we've been seeing around the country.
Yeah, I'll just add 2 points to this. That this challenge of low connectivity has some little solution that on the Diksha app, you can download an entire class in an area where there is network. The other thing we are trying is we give the entire syllabus on a pen drive, and the teacher loads it onto the laptop and teaches the children. But yes, a phone is a must. The smartphone is a must. So that, of course, is a challenge of budgetary constraint. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that will be resolved. We might have a smartphone which is cheap or easily maintainable at every level. We might have good connectivity. And if we don't have connectivity, the Diksha has this provision. And we also have an e-Pathshala app by NCERT where all the textbooks are in EPUB format. Very low bandwidth. Once you download, it's there in your mobile phone or your laptop for you to see and study.
Okay, someone wants to know, why are we not talking about ebooks? I feel that's...
Well, I just spoke about ebooks.
You did just speak about books, but any reason why we seem to... Because ebooks were at one point, I think, the popular kind of... But I think video has kind of taken that space, right?
You see, about ebooks, I have just one point. See, reading a book by a child is much more useful than an ebook for a child. I'm not talking about a senior person like me. Video is more useful in a IT environment because the book is there with him. He sees the book and because he can make notes there, he can write something. Ebook, you can't do that. So for a child, we would prefer that if they have a textbook, they read the textbook and look at the video. That's what we prefer. But it's an individual preference to all children.
Yes, Shruti, just one more point on this one that from a learning and pedagogy perspective, you are able to read more number of words per minute if you're reading than you're listening or you're watching a video. So there are topics which you don't need too much of in-depth assimilation. You can put it in text. So what we are seeing as an evolution, if you check out, let's say, Coursera platform or Upgrad platform,
Yeah.
there will be certain things on text which you can quickly grasp because you don't need to spend time in understanding. And then when it goes to hardcore concepts and sort of when you want to go into depth, videos play a much better role in communicating that terminology to the other individual. But you can read more when you're reading versus when you're listening or hearing something out. So there's always the benefit that if it's easy to do, read, finish it off, you can finish the chapter much faster as you go along.
Yeah. I think we just have around 5 more minutes, so we'll have to. If someone wants to make, a closing kind of remark around online content and what are the challenges around it, and how we can make it more accessible to a lot more people in India. Uh, be it whether they're starting out at this primary school level or school level, or whether trying to upgrade. If someone wants to make a closing comment, because I'm being told we just have around 4 minutes now, so we'll have to kind of wrap it up.
I think 1 minute, and maybe I'll then let everyone maybe make a closing.
Yeah.
I think one point that I wanted to mention that look, COVID is a blessing in disguise for a country like India. I think in a place where we need online education to spread, I think we got it and it helped us spread online education. I truly believe that this is an opportunity. Either we take it for training a large number of people, but given the fact that we have some of the best teachers and large number of teachers, can we leverage this opportunity to even convert India as the teaching capital of the world? And that is something that is my personal ambition that look, we have great coaches, we have great mentors, we have great faculty members, we have great research assistants and TAs and PhD candidates. Leveraging technology while we bring best content out, Shruti, can we leverage the human network to teach and provide the coaching and mentoring needed for the global workforce also? I think if that's an opportunity we can leverage with what COVID has thrown at us, I think it's a huge upside that this country can get out of this particular crisis.
Does anyone else want to add to the closing remarks? Raghav.
Sure, I can add on. I think we've seen, and again, I say this for higher education, right? But I think we've seen changes in higher education at a faster pace than we've probably seen in the last 50, 100 years or so. I think for India, it's a great opportunity for us to up-level the quality of education that we're generally delivering to colleges and students. And without getting into the statistics of, how many students get employed and all of those things, I think this is genuinely an opportunity for us to provide higher education to many more than 38 million students who get education today. The government has very emphatically talked about increasing the gross enrollment ratio of the country. There's no way we can build so many campuses, right? You can't go from 38 million students to 75 million students by doubling the number of campuses that we have. And so one, it is going to be able to provide access to a lot more people. And second, I really do think we see maybe the top 5-10% educational institutions delivering world-class quality of content and educational experience in general. But I think this gives us the opportunity to increase that number quite significantly. So it has thrown up a lot of challenges, but we're now getting out of it almost, and hopefully we can all focus on what the opportunities can be going forward.
Okay, Satyan?
I'd love to chime in a bit. I frankly believe that we've actually just scratched the surface in actually trying to really understand the power of digital, the power of online in the area of learning and education, right? And I think it's incumbent on all of us to see how we can partner, to see how we can collaborate, to see how we can get perhaps more people to come out there and make a difference. Because at the end of the day, I go back to something that I said at the beginning, right? We all have to think about, how we should never ever leave a child behind, right? If a year passes and we are not able to make a difference, they get left behind. And then, in places where economics plays a huge part in the role of them being able to go forward, it almost always never allows them to go forward, right? Girl children, we are seeing, increasing evidence and numbers of how girl children are even more disadvantaged when it comes to, access to technology, access to mobiles, access to internet. So I think we have just scratched the surface, is my humble submission. We all need to figure out how we can collaborate, get more ideas which are out of the box, and try and see if we can make a difference. And if anyone out there is watching who has, great ideas, please reach out to, the organizers, and they'll be glad to share ideas with all of us.
Well, just one line, that the future of schools depends on innovation, and digital learning is the path to innovation. And everything in the next 20 years will depend on how well we capitalize on this great opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you all for this. We've reached the end of our discussion. It's 1:10, so we'll have to wrap up for the day, I think. So yeah, thank you for this conversation. It was really interesting. I'll hand it over to Vidit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shruti. And thanks a lot to all the speakers. We now actually bring you an educator from Nagaland, co-founder, director, Maple Trees School from Dimapur, to talk about her journey on what led her to start a school in Nagaland.
So, hello, my name is Sashi, and I run a school in Dimapur, Nagaland, the Maple Tree School. My husband and I started the school in April of 2011, and we are completing our 10th academic session this March. We started the school from nursery to grade 5 with a few cottages, 29 children, and a handful of teachers. And now in our 10th year, we have over 700 children, around a 60 plus team of passionate and energetic educators and staff. The cottages have grown, and we have an administrative block, an academic block, and a 200-bedded hostel infrastructure. We have already had 2 batches passing the 12th CBSE board exams with more than excellent results, and our 3rd batch is going to be sitting for the 12 boards this year. We are immensely proud when we look at how far we have come, or how big the school has grown in such a short time, and is now considered as one of the schools of repute in Nagaland. So how did we reach where we are today? Sanan was always, that's my husband, he was very passionate about education, and he had this conviction that if we were to impact lives, it would have to be through education. For me personally, I thought, starting a school was too big a project. What did either of us know anything about running a school, other than the fact that both of us had great schooling experiences? But I think his passion slowly started rubbing off on me, and the more we talked about it, the more I thought about it, the idea became even, more a possibility. And it was around this time that we came across an education leadership program that was being offered by iDiscovery. And it was then that he decided to quit his job and he enrolled in this program. And it was here that we built many valuable relationships that continue to be huge support and mentors for us. Well, if we were to start a school, we did not want to start an usual school. We wanted it to be different, from the usual run-of-the-mill ones where, children are packed into classrooms and given lecture-type classes where children do not understand what they are learning. And in most cases, they come back home to enter long rounds of private tutoring. We wanted our school to be different. We wanted our children to understand what they were learning. We wanted them to enjoy the process of learning. We wanted them to observe, to think on their own, to apply themselves. We wanted them to learn how to speak on their own, to write on their own, and most importantly, to ask questions. So when we started out, we had very meager resources, and at times the project was very overwhelming. But as they say, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one single step. And so far, we have had our fair share of struggles, especially when it comes to managing resources and the continuous work in progress. But we have somehow been able to keep our head above the water. One of the main reasons which has helped us right from day one has been that, our sincere was intent. And if our intent is good and clear, everything will fall into place. Both Sanan and I got into the classroom, we taught and learned along with the students and rest of the teaching team. We also focus on processes, detailed planning, and quality implementation every step of the way. And even now, this is done on a daily basis. Aligning each staff and team member to the purpose of the school was critical, and we try to reflect and revisit our purpose of why we are here every year as we begin, each academic session, and whenever required, especially when we have to take critical decisions. Open and regular channels of communication across the board, and particularly with parents, has been another key contributor. We are thankful to the parents who have, put their faith and believed in us. And so today, when we look back at our journey of 10 years and how far we have come, it just goes to show that if you have the intent and the drive to do something, it will happen. As far as the learning and classroom experiences is concerned, it has been one of challenge and excitement, not only for the students, but for each of us as teachers and educators. How do we make sure that each child becomes an independent learner? Or how do we move children from rote, repetition, fear, and really no learning to a place where they were exploring, investigating, where self-learning was happening and confidence was developing and children, were figuring out things for themselves? How do we move teachers from a radio type of a classroom where teachers occupy most of the talk time to a place where children do most of the talking? For teachers to become facilitators, guides, and mentors rather than knowledge givers. So we have teacher lead and mentors, we have regular peer observations and feedback, and every day is a learning for the entire Maple Tree community. There is a lot of creativity and sharing. Many mistakes happen, but we learn from them and keep on moving and growing. This academic session particularly has been a challenging one for schools across the world. And I'm really super proud of the way Maple Tree has been able to adapt and quickly align itself to the new requirements. This was possible again with detailed planning, preparation, and quality implementation. It has been a huge leveler, and I choose to look at the positive impact it has had on us. Our teachers and students have had to upskill and upgrade their IT skills in a very short span, and they have been more than able to take up the challenge. And I can confidently say that compared, our online classes have been comparable to some of the best schools in the country or even the world. With daily Zoom classes, learning has happened, not only academics, but we could do many activities online. So it has really been, a journey of, exploration, learning, and growth. And even today, I learn each and every day. Yeah. So that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being a lovely audience. We will come back here tomorrow with an equally interesting lineup of speakers. And a big thank you to our sponsors, Google for Education as presenting partner and Adobe, our co presenter. So I will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Bye. Stay safe.